Chapter 960. Zhou used Truth Listener to observe carefully and heard a behemoth moving in the seawater. Before he could determine what the behemoth in the seawater was, he suddenly saw the seawater suddenly rise, forming a huge wave. In the wave, a huge dark blue crab the size of a castle walked out of the sea. The tank-like crab on the beach was already very big, but in front of the dark blue crab, it looked like a newborn crab. Even the 20-meter-tall wall was much shorter in front of the crab. One of its crab pincers was terrifyingly large. Seeing the giant crab come out of the sea, everyone was stunned. Even the epic experts who were fighting the crab horde had a drastic change in expression. Before the giant crab's legs could walk out of the seawater, it suddenly opened its mouth and spewed out countless bubbles. The bubbles flew in the direction of Sea Return City, filling the sky. Someone fired at the flying bubbles. When the bullet hit the bubbles, the seemingly light and thin bubbles didn't shatter. Instead, after the bullet drilled in, it immediately floated in the bubbles as though it had lost gravity. Some people used sabers or ordered companion beasts to rush forward to destroy the bubbles, but no matter what it was, it would be sucked into the bubbles the moment it touched them. Then, the bubbles that had already sucked in something seemed to be pulled into the sky by some force. In the blink of an eye, they flew up to a height of hundreds of meters. Furthermore, they were still rapidly rising as though they were about to break through the atmosphere and enter the universe. When people saw this scene, they began to dodge the bubbles in horror. After all, only a few humans knew how to fly. Some epic humans couldn't fly in the air because they didn't have flying pet. If they fell from such a height, they would probably die a tragic death. Furthermore, the bubbles were still rapidly rising. If they really entered space, they would definitely die. Instantly, the entire Sea Return City's defense line was in chaos. Not to mention ordinary people, even epic experts began to retreat. As for the crab army, as they had lost their effective resistance, a large number of them rushed to the high walls of Sea Return City. They used their steel-like crab pincers to strike the high walls, causing cement to splatter and steel to break. Before long, the high walls would be breached. The bubbles that filled the sky had already floated into the city. Seeing that Sea Return City definitely couldn't withstand such an attack, Zhou put on the Jade Crystal Spirit armor and flew into the sky. Soon, he arrived above the sea. He held a golden harp in his hand, and his fingers strummed the harp fiercely. Buzz! A strange tremor spread out, and then with the golden harp as the center, the bubbles that filled the sky exploded. The crabs that were already on the shore and in the water were all struck by the terrifying sound wave. They all spat out water and fell to the ground. 70 to 80% of them died. Even if there were some that didn't die, they were heavily injured and struggled to get up. Zhou deliberately used String Sonic Quake at sea that was relatively far from Sea Return City. Although the power of String Sonic Quake still affected the city, it was relatively weak. It didn't have much lethality against humans. The humans who could fight on the front lines had some cultivation levels. When they were struck by the aftershock, they would at most vomit a mouthful of blood. After being struck, the people of Sea Return City turned their heads and looked outside. They saw that almost all the bubbles had exploded. Countless crab army had died. They couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised. When they looked up again, they immediately saw Zhou in the distant sky. Sea Return City was several kilometers away from the coastline. It wasn't that they had good eyesight that allowed them to see Zhou from so far away. It was because Zhou was wearing the mirror-like Jade Crystal Spirit armor. When the sun shone on him, he was like a human-shaped light source. It was difficult not to see him. The might of String Sonic Quake isn't bad. Unfortunately, the harp strings are too useless. I can only do this. Zhou glanced at the golden harp in his hand. A few of the harp strings had already broken. It couldn't be used anymore, so all he could do was put it away and let it slowly recover. The gigantic crab was very close to Zhou. It staggered from the shock and nearly fell into the seawater. It couldn't help but fly into a rage as it brandished its huge crab pincers and smashed them at Zhou. Although it was huge, it wasn't clumsy at all. The crab pincers swung in front of Zhou like a gust of wind. At that moment, many people in the city were looking at Zhou in the sky. They were given a fright when they saw the gigantic crab's ghost-like movements. Zhou's expression didn't change as he pulled out his bamboo blade. At the same time, his body flashed rapidly in the form of transcendent flying immortal as he slashed out with sky slash. The people in the city only saw the humanoid figure rapidly flash around the gigantic crab like streams of light. When Zhou stopped again, the gigantic crab stopped moving its pincers. Crack! Crack! The gigantic crab's carapace suddenly cracked open as the pincers it raised broke into several pieces. They fell and smashed into the water, stirring up waves. Boom! In the end, even the gigantic crab's body was split into pieces and fell into the sea. It looked as if it couldn't be any more dead. The humans in the city were momentarily stunned when they saw this scene. They stared blankly at the gigantic crab that had fallen into the sea and Zhou, who was like a human-shaped sun in the sky. Moments later, people finally reacted and cheered. The joy of escaping death was unparalleled. Zhou rushed into the seawater and disappeared from everyone's sight. By the time he returned to Sea Return City, the jade crystal spirit armor on his body had vanished. He looked like a young father with Ye-er in his arms. He wasn't eye-catching at all. However, there was an additional crab tattoo on Zhou's body. It was the gigantic crab companion egg he had fished out of the sea before hatching. Deep blue crab sovereign, mythical life providence, overlord of the sea life soul, heart of the ocean wheel of destiny, gravity loss control strength, 80 speed, 71 constitution, 80 essence energy, 79 talent skill, gravity bubble, overlord pincer, deep sea emperor companion form, mount, an ocean mount? That's not bad. Zhou didn't have an underwater mount. The great Might Vajra bull was afraid of water. It was fine for it to wade through a small river, but it was impossible for it to enter the sea. The earth elemental beast was fine in the water, but it happened to lack an underwater mount. However, the deep blue crab sovereign was too big. It probably couldn't be used in the river, so it could only be used in the sea. From the looks of it, my luck has been pretty good recently. I've obtained such a good mythical companion beast the moment I came to Sea Return. Perhaps this will be my blessed land, Zhou thought. Chapter 961. Why are you still loitering here? What if you hurt the child? You don't know the severity of the situation. Thankfully, a powerful human expert killed that giant crab. Otherwise, if it rushed into the city and something happened to the child, I want to see how you will explain it to your wife. The middle-aged man met Zhou again and reprimanded him. I'll leave now, Zhou hurriedly said, knowing that he had good intentions. Stay at home and take care of the child. These children are our future. The middle-aged man lectured Zhou again. Before he left, he didn't forget to urge Zhou to return early. Zhou carried the child and headed for another city gate. He still wanted to visit Sea God Reef. His luck today seemed pretty good. He had a feeling that he might find the tiny palm symbol. Sea God Reef was also known as the Dragon King Reef by the locals. Every time the tide receded, one could see a dragon-shaped reef floating on the surface of the sea like a divine dragon rising and falling in the seawater. Legend had it that the reef was formed from a divine dragon. Due to the restrictions of the world, sea dragons weren't allowed to go ashore. However, the divine dragon's newborn child was fished ashore by a fisherman because of its playfulness. In order to save its child, the divine dragon ignored the restrictions of the world and rushed onto land to snatch its child back. However, because it violated the restrictions, it turned into stone before it could return to the sea and remained here ever since. This was originally just a legend. Later, after the dimensional storms, an area near Sea God Reef became a dimensional zone. Many terrifying dimensional creatures appeared inside. Up to now, no one had truly reached Sea God Reef. It was unknown if Sea God Reef had transformed back into a divine dragon. Now, Sea God Reef couldn't be seen from the sea. In the shallow sea, there were many shrimp soldiers and crab generals. They were all powerful epic existences. Legend had it that deeper in Sea God Reef was Turtle Prime Minister. It was said to be a powerful mythical dimensional creature. Of course, no one dared to enter the deep sea, so they didn't know if these legends were true. There weren't many people in Sea Return City who dared to enter Sea God Reef. When Zhouwen arrived, he didn't encounter anyone. Before coming, Zhouwen had contacted Li Xian, but his phone wasn't working. He was probably in a dimensional zone. "Young man, why aren't you listening to my advice? Why are you running around with a child?" Just as Zhouwen arrived at the periphery of the Sea God Reef dimensional zone, he heard a familiar voice before he entered. He turned around and saw that it was indeed the middle-aged man from before. "Brother, what a coincidence! Why are you here too?" Zhouwen asked the middle-aged man with a smile. "The crabs that came ashore this time might be related to the Sea God Reef, so I came to investigate." "I say, what's wrong with you? You're already an adult, and you even have a child. How can you be so reckless?" The middle-aged man said. "This is my sister," Zhouwen explained. "Then all the more reason why you shouldn't have brought her to such a dangerous place. Your mother is already so old. How much effort and risk did she have to take to give birth to another daughter? If anything happens to her, how are you going to answer to the two elders?" The middle-aged man tried his best to educate Zhouwen. Just as Zhouwen was about to explain, he suddenly heard a dragon roar coming from the sea. The two of them subconsciously turned their heads and saw that the dragon roar was coming from the direction of Sea God Reef. However, as they were still outside the dimensional zone, the surface of the sea was covered in fog. They couldn't see anything clearly. They could only walk in to know what was happening inside. "Quickly send your sister back. If you want to take the risk yourself. Don't joke around with the child's safety," the middle-aged man exhorted Zhouwen before running toward Sea God Reef. "Brother, I don't know what's going on inside. It's best you don't go in," Zhouwen kindly reminded him. "My job is to investigate the nearby dimensional zones. If there's danger, I have to give a warning in advance. Quickly go back. I have to figure out what happened here," the middle-aged man said as he rushed into the Sea God Reef dimensional zone. Zhouwen originally didn't plan on entering. He just wanted to search for the tiny palm symbol outside, but seeing that the middle-aged man was a good person, he thought for a moment and decided to enter to take a look. If anything really happened, he could help him. In this era, there weren't many people who were willing to care about others. Zhouwen really didn't want anything to happen to him. He walked into the fog with Ye-er in his arms. The fog looked so thick that it couldn't dissipate, but when Zhouwen walked in, he saw a beautiful golden beach. The middle-aged man was standing on the beach, staring blankly in the direction of the sea. Zhouwen traced his gaze and his eyes lit up. He saw a golden dragon frolicking in the seawater. Its scales seemed to be made of gold as they shimmered with a mysterious glow under the sunlight. After all, Zhouwen had seen many dragons and killed some. He quickly reacted and hurriedly used turtle aura to converge his aura to the extreme to prevent attracting the golden dragon's attention. The golden dragon's aura was comparable to the white dragon Zhouwen had met in Dragon's Well. They were extremely terrifying existences. Without knowing the other party's abilities, Zhouwen wasn't willing to fight it. The golden dragon didn't seem to mind the insect-like humans. It swam in the sea as though it was in a good mood. The middle-aged man snapped out of his shock. Clearly, he knew very well that he couldn't be compared to the golden dragon. He slowly retreated, hoping to leave the Sea God Reef dimensional zone. After taking a few steps back, he saw Zhouwen carrying Ye-er. His expression immediately changed. Zhouwen hurriedly gestured for him to keep quiet to prevent alarming the golden dragon. Thankfully, the middle-aged man wasn't stupid. He knew that he couldn't alarm the golden dragon, so he didn't plan on saying anything. He swallowed the words he wanted to reprimand Zhou. The two of them slowly retreated, not daring to retreat too fast. They just moved step by step. However, before they could go far, the golden dragon seemed to sense something and turned to look at Zhou and company. The golden crystal-like dragon eyes lit up when it saw them. Then, half of its body emerged from the sea and stared down at them. "We're doomed!" The uncle's heart palpitated. Being targeted by such a terrifying creature meant that the chances of survival were slim. The golden dragon stared at them for a while before suddenly raising its head and letting out a shocking dragon roar. With its dragon roar, the calm surface of the sea instantly became turbulent. Then, Zhou and the middle-aged man saw rows of odd-looking shrimp soldiers and crab generals on the waves as they rushed to the shore. "Let's go!" The middle-aged man pulled Zhou and turned to rush out of the dimensional zone. However, when they turned around, rows of prawn soldiers and crab generals were already standing behind them. They had long since sealed off their escape route. Chapter 962. The shrimp soldiers and crab generals looked terrifying. They stood upright and were 2 to 3 meters tall. Their faces were strange, and the shells on their bodies had turned into battle armor. Their limbs were still as sharp as blades, giving off a ferocious and terrifying feeling. They didn't have the cuteness and charm they had when they were at the dining table. However, the shrimp soldiers and crab generals only blocked their path and didn't immediately attack. At this moment, more shrimp soldiers and crab generals had already arrived on the beach. There were thousands of them, and it was unknown how many there were. They had already surrounded them. The middle-aged man's expression was nasty. He sighed and said to Zhou, "I told you long ago not to take risks with the child, but you refused to listen. Now there's no chance to leave." "They don't look hostile towards us." Zhou found it odd. Typically, dimensional creatures would attack humans immediately, but these shrimp soldiers and crab generals only lined up neatly without showing any signs of attacking. "What's the need for hostility? Just a spit from each of them can kill us." The middle-aged man summoned his companion beast and planned on risking his life. Then, he said to Zhou, "Although it's impossible for there to be any chance, escape if there's a chance when the battle starts." With that said, the middle-aged man prepared to rush forward and fight the shrimp soldiers and crab generals that blocked the way. However, at that moment, the shrimp soldiers and crab generals suddenly parted to the sides and made way. A huge sea turtle that was about 20 to 30 meters tall and dressed in black armor walked over like a human. It carried a fanged spear. Looking at the strange tortoise with bulging muscles and ferocious armor, the middle-aged man was alarmed. Could that be the legendary mythical creature, Turtle Prime Minister? Clang! The Turtle Prime Minister walked in front of them step by step. Every step it took was like a mountain moving horizontally, causing the ground to tremble. It stabbed the fanged spear on its shoulder into the ground, and the weight of the spear immediately created a huge crater in the beach. A shockwave surged from the yellow sand beside it with an extremely powerful aura. The middle-aged man gritted his teeth. Although he knew that he was no match for them, he couldn't just wait for death. He had to kill as many as he could before he died. Just as he was about to risk his life, he suddenly saw the Turtle Prime Minister suddenly kneel down on one knee and bow at Zhou. He lowered his head and said in a thunderous voice, "My lord, my master invites you to the sea for a gathering. I hope you will agree to it. I'll be extremely grateful." The middle-aged man was dumbfounded. He stared blankly at Prime Minister Turtle, who was kneeling on one knee. He thought he was dreaming. The legendary mythical creature, Turtle Prime Minister, had actually bowed to a young man. Furthermore, he had respectfully addressed him as Lord. This was unbelievable. The middle-aged man looked at Zhou with an odd expression. Now, he suspected that Zhou was a terrifying dimensional creature that had transformed into a human. Who's your master? Zhou looked in the direction of the sea, but the golden dragon had already vanished. Sir, you have already met my master. Now, my master is waiting for you in the Dragon Palace, Prime Minister Turtle said. Then I'll meet him. This person doesn't have any ill intentions towards you. Let him leave, Zhou said as he pointed at the middle-aged man. My lord, we will naturally obey your orders. Prime Minister Turtle stood up and waved his hand. The shrimp soldiers that were blocking the way immediately made way. Dimensional creatures are ferocious and violent. It's best you don't take the risk, the middle-aged man said hesitantly. It's fine. It's just a dragon palace. It can't trap me. Go back first, Zhou said. The middle-aged man wore an odd expression, but he didn't say anything else. He turned around and headed for the Dimensional Zone's exit. Indeed, none of the shrimp soldiers stopped him. They lined up to welcome Zhou into the sea like a guard of honor. The shrimp soldiers and crab generals lined up on both sides, separating the seawater. It was as though a curtain had been lifted from the sea, revealing a path that led deep into the sea. When the middle-aged man saw Zhou walk into the sea with the child, he gritted his teeth and left the dimensional zone. When he arrived outside the dimensional zone, he looked back at the fog-shrouded beach and sea. He felt like he had been dreaming. A mythical dimensional creature actually knelt to a young human. I'm afraid no one will believe me even if I tell them, right? The middle-aged man suspected if he had been hallucinating. With Prime Minister Turtle leading the way, Zhou walked all the way to the deep sea. The scenery at the bottom of the sea was beautiful and mysterious. In the curtain-like seawater, he could see all kinds of sea creatures wandering everywhere. He even saw a few beautiful women lying in shells. They were likely the legendary clam fairies. Zhou had always imagined that the sea dragons lived in underwater palaces, just like the famous Crystal Palace. That was the residence of the East Sea Dragon King. However, this Dragon King didn't seem to be too particular. When Zhou arrived at the so-called Dragon Palace, he realized that it was a huge sunken ship. Zhou didn't know much about ships, nor did he know what type it was. However, from the size of the ship, Zhou guessed that it was the top marine combat unit of humanity before the dimensional storms, an aircraft carrier. However, after the dimensional storms, aircraft carriers, various fleets, and cruise ships were mostly sunk by dimensional creatures. Even if this ship wasn't an aircraft carrier, it didn't look like a dragon palace at all. The sunken ship seemed to be protected by some force, preventing the seawater from approaching it. Zhou followed Prime Minister Turtle to the deck. The Prime Minister Turtle knelt down on one knee again and lowered his head towards the cabin. My lord, His Excellency is here for an appointment. My lord, please follow me. A graceful clam woman walked over leisurely. After bowing at Zhou, she made an inviting gesture. Zhou followed her into the cabin and soon arrived at a relatively large cabin. Just as Zhou was wondering how the gigantic golden dragon had entered the cabin, he saw a voluptuous woman dressed in golden armor with dragon horns on her head. Her hair was also golden. She was sitting on a wide chair opposite him like a queen. However, the chair didn't look like the legendary Dragon King coral chair. Instead, it looked like the chair on a human battleship control panel. So that golden dragon is actually female. She can even transform into a human form. Zhou was somewhat surprised as he couldn't help but size up the Dragon Queen. The Dragon Queen's skin was fair, but her pupils were golden. She looked at Zhou and asked, "Are you the spokesperson of the ancient dragon race?" "What ancient dragon race? I've never heard of it," Zhou said. "If you're not the spokesperson of the ancient dragon race, why do you have a keepsake of the ancient dragon race?" The Dragon Queen asked with a frown. "A keepsake of the ancient dragon race?" Zhou was slightly taken aback before he recalled something. He took out the dragon tooth pendant around his neck and said, "Are you talking about this? This was carved by my teacher using a dragon tooth. It's just an ordinary gift, not a keepsake." The Dragon Queen stared at Zhou for a while. Since you have the ancient dragon race's keepsake, no matter where you obtained it from, you are the spokesperson of the ancient dragon race. From today onwards, you are the son-in-law of my dragon palace. Chapter 963. Zhou looked at the Dragon Queen in astonishment. No matter how he thought about it, he never expected the Dragon Queen to say such a thing. He was a pure human, and the Dragon Queen was a dimensional creature. They weren't of the same species at all. How could he become the Dragon Palace's son-in-law? Furthermore, Zhou had never thought of marriage. All he could do was say, "Thank you for your kindness, but I don't plan on getting married." When the Dragon Queen heard Zhou's answer, her expression immediately turned cold. Die or become the Dragon Palace's son-in-law. Choose one. Zhou looked at the Dragon Queen with a strange expression and asked, "There are many humans. If you want to get married, many human men should be willing. Why must you choose me?" The Dragon Queen said with a cold expression, "A mere human doesn't even have the right to look at me. Am I not a human?" Zhou asked in puzzlement. The Dragon Queen didn't answer. She only stared at him coldly and said, "Give me an answer immediately. Do you want to become the Dragon Palace's son-in-law, or do you want to die here?" "Sorry, I don't plan on getting married yet." Zhou naturally wouldn't choose to become the Dragon Palace's son-in-law. She wasn't of the same species. The Dragon Queen flipped out when she heard that. "Take him down." With the Dragon Queen's voice, shrimp soldiers and crab generals immediately rushed forward. The shrimp soldiers stabbed at Zhou with their shrimp spears. Zhou used his movement technique and rushed towards the cabin's exit. The row of shrimp soldiers guarding the exit also stabbed at Zhou with their shrimp spears. Zhou unsheathed his bamboo blade and sliced all the shrimp spears in front of him. He carried Ye to the deck. Prime Minister Turtle stood on the deck, his previous humble attitude completely gone. He carried the huge spear and smashed it at Zhou. The spear was fast and ferocious. Furthermore, the spear was extremely heavy. Zhou estimated that his strength probably couldn't withstand such a powerful attack, so he could only use his movement technique to dodge. Prime Minister Turtle brandished his spear like a gale sweeping away fallen leaves. His huge body didn't look clumsy at all. Zhou dodged left and right. Although he dodged the attack, he was momentarily unable to shake off Prime Minister Turtle. A Prime Minister Turtle is already so powerful. The Dragon Queen must be even more terrifying. Zhou didn't panic. He had teleportation and invisibility. Even if he couldn't beat them, he could escape. This guy is completely different from the legendary Prime Minister Turtle. He's a super berserker. Zhou saw that Prime Minister Turtle was becoming more and more ferocious as the battle progressed. Furthermore, it was invulnerable. Zhou's attacks didn't pose much of a threat to it, so he didn't want to waste time with it. He switched to the new Era Life Soul and used his teleportation ability to rush out of the Dragon Palace and into the sea. No matter how ferocious Prime Minister Turtle was, he couldn't catch up to the teleporting Zhou. After a few teleportations, Zhou had already shaken off Prime Minister Turtle. Just as he was about to swim out of the sea, he suddenly saw a golden figure flash. It was the Dragon Queen dressed in golden dragon scale armor. Her figure was voluptuous, but her fists were even more voluptuous than her figure. With a punch, the seawater formed a terrifying vortex under her fist, causing Zhou's body to involuntarily be sucked towards her fist. Zhou hurriedly used teleportation to rush out of the terrifying fist force's range. However, just as Zhou teleported out, the Dragon Queen appeared in front of him. The terrifying fist force was about to land on Zhou. Zhou had no choice but to teleport again, but after several consecutive teleportations, he failed to escape the Dragon Queen. Every time he teleported out, the Dragon Queen would appear in front of him. What was even more terrifying was that Zhou had teleported so many times. Logically speaking, He should have already rushed out of the sea and arrived at the beach, but all he could see was endless seawater. It was as though he was still deep in the sea. Where I am is deep blue. No matter how powerful you are, you can't escape this sea. If you agree to become the Dragon Palace's son-in-law now, I can give you a chance, the Dragon Queen said as she chased after Zhouwen. What do you see in me? I'll change, all right? Zhouwen said speechlessly. Unless you die, you have to become the Dragon Palace's son-in-law. The Dragon Queen wasn't human, so she couldn't hear the sarcasm in Zhouwen's words. You are a dragon, and I'm a human. We aren't of the same race. It's impossible for us to marry each other, Zhouwen said as he dodged. At the same time, he was thinking of a way to escape. Who said I want to marry you? I want you to become the Dragon Palace's son-in-law and marry my sister. She has half-human blood, the Dragon Queen said. Wait, are you saying that you want me to marry your sister? But I've never seen your sister. Who is your sister? Zhouwen was slightly taken aback. The Dragon Queen stood opposite Zhouwen and didn't continue attacking. She took out a shell and opened it. Light immediately shot out from the shell like a holographic projection. The light condensed into a woman's figure. Qin Ling. Zhouwen cried out involuntarily when he saw the woman's figure. Without a doubt, the figure was Qin Ling. It was identical, so it was impossible for him to be mistaken. You've seen her? That's for the best. In that case, stay in the Dragon Palace in peace and wait to marry my sister, the Dragon Queen said. Wait. Zhouwen extended his hand to stop the Dragon Queen who was about to capture him. He looked at her and said, If your sister is really Qin Ling, then she already has a fiancé and their relationship is very good. I believe that even if I'm willing to marry her, she won't be willing to marry me. I think you're mistaken. It's best you ask your sister first. The Dragon Queen said coldly, Ordinary humans aren't qualified to marry my sister. Your sister's fiancé isn't an ordinary human. He's very talented and will definitely become a top expert in the future. He'll surpass me in no way. Zhouwen praised Feng Qiuquan like there was no one in the world. However, his words were sincere. Feng Qiuyan's talent was indeed unparalleled. Furthermore, he was very hard-working, not inferior to Zhouwen. It's useless no matter how outstanding he is. Without the recognition of the dimensional law, it's impossible to marry, the Dragon Queen said. What dimensional law? I'm also a human. If he isn't recognized, I won't be recognized either, right? Zhouwen was even more puzzled. You're different. You have already been recognized, the Dragon Queen said. I've been recognized? When? Zhouwen was even more puzzled. He didn't have a seal on his head, so why did the Dragon Queen say that he had been recognized? The Dragon Queen snorted coldly. You're still playing dumb. Do you think I don't recognize the Heavenly Happiness card? Heavenly Happiness card? Zhouwen immediately realized something and hurriedly took out the stone tablet that Emperor of Shang had given him. Are you talking about this? Chapter 964. That's right. The Dragon Queen looked at the stone monument and nodded. If that's the case, it's very simple. I can give it to your sister's fiancé. That way they can be legitimate, Zhouwen said. The Heavenly Happiness token has already been contracted with you. What's the point of giving it to him? The Dragon Queen snorted coldly. Holy **T, why did Emperor of Shang give me such a token? I really didn't want to get married. Zhouwen regretted it so much that his intestines turned green. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have taken the token. However, on second thought, Feng Qiuyan's fiancée wasn't human. At the very least, she wasn't a pure human. Feng Qiuyan probably hadn't seen wrongly when he was young. Your Majesty, it doesn't matter if there's a token or not. I can tell that your sister and my classmate, Feng Qiuyan, are truly in love. Why do you have to separate them? Zhouwen wanted to use words to move the Dragon Queen. If he thought about it carefully, this Dragon Queen was Feng Qiuyan's sister-in-law. In the future, they might be on the same side, so it wasn't good to fight. Without the heavenly happiness token, it's useless whatever you say. If you can't use the heavenly happiness token to reverse her fate and break the taboo, she can only become the Seven Seas Dragon King's concubine, the Dragon Queen said. What Seven Seas Dragon King? Zhouwen was somewhat puzzled when he heard that. He had only heard of the Four Seas Dragon Kings. What the hell was the Seven Seas Dragon King? Why would Qinling become his concubine? The Dragon Queen had a favor to ask of Zhouwen, so she had no choice but to patiently explain. This sea is called the Seven Dragons Sea. In fact, it's a huge dimensional zone. Sea God Reef is only a small dimensional zone. In every dimensional zone like Sea God Reef, there's a dragon monarch. However, the supreme ruler of the Seven Dragons Sea is the Seven Seas Dragon King. He's the supreme existence that rules over everything in the Seven Dragons Sea. After explaining the cause and effect of the Dragon Queen's matter, Zhouwen finally had a clearer understanding of the entire matter. Dragons were extremely lustful. In fact, the seven dragon monarch domains of the Seven Dragons Sea were the Seven Seas Dragon King's harem base. Once a new female dragon was born, they would be included in the Seven Seas Dragon King's harem. The Dragon Queen's father was the Dragon King of the Sea God Reef, and her mother was also a dragon. As the Seven Seas Dragon King wanted to occupy her mother, the old Dragon King of the Sea God Reef fought the Seven Seas Dragon King and was eventually killed by the Seven Seas Dragon King. Her mother was also seriously injured in that battle and was saved by a human. Later, for some reason, her mother gave birth to Qinling with that human and passed away. The Seven Seas Dragon King didn't kill them all and made the Dragon Queen the Dragon Queen of Sea God Reef. However, the Seven Seas Dragon King didn't do it out of kindness. He was waiting for the Dragon Queen and Qinling to reach adulthood. Once they reached adulthood, they had to become concubines of the Seven Seas Dragon King. Have you never thought of killing the Seven Seas Dragon King? Zhouwen asked. The Seven Seas Dragon King is a terregrade existence. Even if the seven dragon monarchs join forces, they won't be his match, the Dragon Queen said indifferently. Terregrade. Zhouwen felt a headache when he heard that. Banana Fairy's evolution hadn't been completed, so Zhouwen didn't have a good solution to the terregrade. Can't you escape inland with your sister? The world is so huge. It's impossible for the Seven Seas Dragon King to find you, right? Zhouwen said after some thought. The Dragon Queen nodded and said, I think so too. However, we are restricted by the dimensional zone. It's impossible for us to leave the sea. I can't even leave the dimensional zone. My sister has half a human bloodline. She can leave the dimensional zone, but she can't be too far from the sea. Unless, at this point, the Dragon Queen didn't continue as she looked at Zhouwen. Zhouwen immediately understood what she meant and said, the heavenly happiness token on me can remove the dimensional zone's restrictions on her, right? That's right. That's why she can only marry you. With the power of the heavenly happiness token, she can escape the restrictions of the dimensional zone, the Dragon Queen said. However, Zhouwen shook his head and said, I only have one heavenly happiness token. Even if I can save Qinling, I can't save you too, right? I'll handle my own matters. All you need to do is marry Qinling and take her inland, the Dragon Queen said. Impossible. Zhouwen shook his head. If you don't do it, you'll die, the Dragon Queen said with a cold expression. Zhouwen looked at the Dragon Queen and continued, It would have been fine if I didn't know about it, but now that I know about it, I'll feel very uncomfortable if I watch a tragedy happen to you and your sister without doing anything. If you're willing, please let me help you kill the Seven Seas Dragon King and save you and the entire Seven Dragons Sea. Zhouwen thought that this might be a good opportunity. He might be able to obtain huge benefits while the Seven Dragons Sea was in chaos. The Dragon Queen looked at Zhouwen as though she was looking at a fool. Do you know what an existence at the terregrade is? It's an existence that can kill you thousands of times with a finger. Actually, I've seen a few at the Terrorgrade. They're not as terrifying as you make them out to be. If you believe me, give me some time. I'll definitely be able to save you. Zhouwen thought about how to convince the Dragon Queen to become his spy in the Seven Dragons Sea. No matter how much time you have, it's impossible for a human like you to defeat the Seven Seas Dragon King. Besides, there's no time. According to the dragon race's standards, Qin Ling will be an adult in half a year, the Dragon Queen said. What about you? Zhouwen asked the Dragon Queen. Less than a month. The Dragon Queen hesitated for a moment before answering Zhouwen's question. Less than a month? Zhouwen pondered. It was clearly very difficult to advance to the Terrorgrade. Zhouwen didn't know if Banana Fairy could complete her advancement in a month. Stop dreaming. There's only one path for you now. Marry Qin Ling and take her inland, making it so that the Seven Seas Dragon King will never find her, the Dragon Queen said. If I want to take her away, I should take you away. What Zhouwen meant was that Qin Ling still had half a year, and the Dragon Queen only had a month left. He naturally had to save the Dragon Queen first. He could still stall for time to think of a solution for Qin Ling. However, these words sounded different in the Dragon Queen's ears. She looked at Zhouwen in a daze. Zhouwen didn't feel that there was anything wrong with his words, nor did he notice the Dragon Queen's abnormality. He was now thinking that this might be a great opportunity. It was very difficult to kill a Terrorgrade dimensional creature, but if he had the help of a spy, he might still have a chance. According to the Dragon Queen, the 7 dragon monarchs of the 7 dragons sea probably didn't have a good impression of the 7 seas Dragon King. They might even hate him to the bone. If he could incite an internal strife, he might have a chance to kill the 7 seas Dragon King. It wasn't realistic to kill the 7 seas Dragon King in a terror form, but the Terrorgrade wasn't always in a terror form. If he could catch him off guard, he might not need to wait for Banana Fairy to complete her evolution. You should have a name, right? How should I address you? Zhouwen asked the Dragon Queen. Chapter 965. Mia, the Dragon Queen answered. Mia, actually, it's not a good idea to take Qin Ling away. The dimensional zones will definitely be unsealed in the future. When the time comes, will the 7 seas Dragon King let her off? I'm afraid his hatred will only deepen when the time comes. If he's caught, it will be even worse. The only solution is to kill the 7 seas Dragon King. Only then can the two of you obtain true liberation, Zhouwen said sincerely. Zhouwen said sincerely, we can deal with the 7 seas Dragon King together. Can you tell me what kind of dimensional creature the 7 seas Dragon King is? Unless I can advance to the Terrorgrade, there's no hope, Mia said, but she still told Zhouwen about the 7 seas Dragon King. As Mia's father had once risked his life with the 7 seas Dragon King back then, Mia had witnessed the battle with her own eyes. She knew the 7 seas Dragon King's abilities rather well. However, even Mia didn't understand some of the abilities the 7 seas Dragon King used. Therefore, when she explained them, there were some parts that were only described. According to Mia, the 7 seas Dragon King didn't seem to be a divine dragon in the traditional sense. It had 7 dragon heads and a massive body. Any one of the dragon heads possessed unparalleled strength. Furthermore, as long as one was grabbed by the 7 seas Dragon King, it would be difficult for them to escape. Back then, Mia's father's combat strength was extremely powerful. The reputation of the Golden Dragon King made him a top existence in the 7 dragon seas. He was considered the strongest combat force in the 7 dragon seas, and his golden dragon body was almost immortal. However, after being grabbed by the 7 seas Dragon King, his golden dragon body couldn't withstand the terrifying power. In the end, Mia watched as her father's golden dragon body was devoured by the 7 seas Dragon King. Does every dragon head of the 7 seas Dragon King have different elemental powers? For example, wind, fire, lightning, and so on? Zhouwen thought of the Orochi he had previously seen. No, the 7 dragon heads have the same strength. They can spit out a terrifying liquid. Once you're touched by the liquid, your body will be immobilized and you can only be slaughtered, Mia said. What's its terror form like? Zhouwen asked in detail. I didn't see it. When it used its terror form, the sea stirred up huge wave. All I could see was a terrifying dragon body tumbling in the wave. I couldn't see its full appearance, Mia answered. From what you said, if you are willing to join forces with me, we might have a chance of killing the 7 Seas Dragon King. If we can contact the other 6 dragon monarchs and get them to help, we will have a greater chance, Zhouwen said. You can't even defeat me. What right do you have to say that you can kill the 7 Seas Dragon King? Although Mia still retorted, for some reason, she didn't say that Zhouwen was delusional. Who says I'm not your match? I just don't want to use my true strength to harm you, Zhouwen said. Mia looked at Zhouwen and said, then use your true strength. Unless you really have the strength to convince me, I definitely won't let Qinling take such a risk. Zhouwen knew that Mia's combat strength was powerful. Her strength and physique seemed to be in no way inferior to Tyrant Behemoth. It wasn't easy to defeat her. Thankfully, Zhouwen was known as the man with the most companion beasts on Earth and the highest quality. Zhouwen summoned Tyrant Behemoth and landed in front of Mia. He looked at her and asked, Do you know what this is? Tyrant Behemoth. I've seen it on the rankings. So its owner is you. Mia was slightly surprised. She never expected Zhouwen to have such a powerful companion beast like Tyrant Behemoth. However, although Tyrant Behemoth was powerful, Mia didn't believe that she was inferior to it. Even if Zhouwen was Tyrant Behemoth's owner, he definitely didn't have the ability to challenge the 7 Seas Dragon King. Even she and Turtle Minister couldn't do it. Do you believe me now? Zhouwen asked. Although Tyrant Behemoth is strong, it might not be able to defeat me, Mia said. Then what if I add these? Zhouwen began summoning companion beasts. He summoned the 3 demon blood true dragons, light concealment sword, and deep blue crab sovereign. When Mia saw that Zhouwen had so many mythical companion beasts, she couldn't help but be alarmed. She already believed what Zhouwen had said. No matter how many ordinary mythical companion beasts there are, it's impossible for them to kill the 7 Seas Dragon King. This is because the terror grade is in existence on another level. It's not something that can be defeated with numbers, Mia said. It's not just quantity. There's also quality. Zhouwen summoned Torch Dragon again. Torch Dragon. Mia recognized Torch Dragon at a glance. Dragons were perhaps the dimensional creatures with the most branches. There were almost countless dragon-type creatures. Some dragons weren't very strong, and they couldn't even reach the mythical stage. However, some dragons were terrifyingly powerful. They could even fight terrifying existences at the Calamity grade. Torch Dragon was undoubtedly one of the most terrifying existences among dragon-type creatures. As a dragon, Mia naturally recognized it. Unfortunately, it's still a juvenile. If it can reach adulthood and transform into its terror form, it might really be able to kill the 7 Seas Dragon King. Mia carefully sized up Torch Dragon and said in disappointment when she saw that it was still a juvenile. Even if it's still young, it's ultimately a Torch Dragon. Its bright torch vision world should still be of some use against the 7 Seas Dragon King. Furthermore, we don't need to fight it head-on. As long as you tell me the details of the 7 Seas Dragon King, I can think of a way to assassinate it without it transforming into its terror form. Zhouwen continued persuading Mia. This is too dangerous. There's almost no chance of success, Mia said after some thought. As long as you believe me, we can think of a way. I will save you and your sister from the sea of misery. Zhouwen knew that it wasn't easy to make Mia believe him. After all, they were facing the Terrorgrade 7 Seas Dragon King. However, Zhouwen needed Mia's help, so he could only patiently win her trust. What do you want to do? Mia asked after some hesitation. Do you think we can convince the other 6 dragon monarchs? Zhou asked. Absolutely impossible, Mia answered with certainty. Why? Aren't they also suppressed by the 7 Seas Dragon King? Don't tell me they don't want to resist? Zhou said in disbelief. That depends on having the ability to resist. Apart from me being forced to do so, the other dragon monarchs won't risk their lives to resist, Mia said with certainty. In that case, tell me about the other 6 dragon monarchs and their dimensional zones first. Perhaps I can think of a solution. Zhou wanted to obtain as much information as possible. Mia explained the situation in the 7 dragon seas to Zhou in detail, making him sigh at how good it felt to have a spy provide information. He didn't need to go anywhere to understand the situation in the 7 dragon seas. Chapter 966. After Zhou figured out the situation in the 7 dragon seas, he realized that the 7 dragon seas didn't have any proper dragon monarch. Mia was already considered the most normal dragon in the 7 dragon seas. According to her, the dragon monarchs in the other 6 dimensional zones basically didn't have true dragon forms. Some looked like crocodiles, some looked like lobsters, and one looked like a whale. However, because they all had some dragon bloodline, they also called themselves dragon monarch. That 7 Seas Dragon King shouldn't be a purebred dragon monarch. In Zhouwen's impression, a purebred dragon monarch was likely like the white dragon in Dragon's Well. If it were any other time, Zhou wouldn't have gone to unknown dimensional zones to kill dimensional creatures. However, with Mia's intelligence, things were different. As long as Mia's intelligence wasn't wrong, it wouldn't be difficult for Zhou to rush into the dimensional zones to kill the dragon monarchs. After all, those single mythical creatures were no match for a group of mythical pet. Do you think those dragon monarchs will help the 7 Seas Dragon King to become enemies with us if we fight him to the death? Zhou slowly enticed Mia. If the 7 Seas Dragon King summons them, they won't dare disobey his orders, Mia said. Alright, I'll get rid of those troubles first. Wait for my good news in the Dragon Palace, Zhou said as he prepared to leave. Stop, Mia called out to him. Is it still not enough? Zhou imagined that Mia had seen through his thoughts. You are a human after all. If you walk in the sea, you will definitely be discovered. Here's a dragon pearl. Take it with you. As long as you aren't close to a mythical creature, it will be very difficult for you to be discovered. It also has a certain ability to avoid water. Mia took out a pearl and handed it to Zhou. How can I accept this? Zhou looked at the pearl and felt somewhat embarrassed to receive it. He only wanted to use Mia's intelligence to achieve his goal of killing monsters. He felt somewhat embarrassed seeing Mia return something to him. It's nothing to risk your life for us sisters. Mia clearly believed that Zhou sincerely wanted to help them. Zhouwen's face blushed slightly. Although he did want to help Mia and Qinling, he mostly wanted to use Mia's intelligence to kill dimensional creatures in order to obtain more resources. Ahem, alright then. I'll accept it. I'll return it to you in the future. Zhou took the dragon pearl and realized that it was a companion egg. You don't have to be surprised. This is something my father left behind after he passed away. Since you want to help us sisters, then let it be your help. If you have the ability, you can hatch it. It should be of some use when fighting the 7 Seas Dragon King, said Mia. Zhou was truly embarrassed this time. Mia seemed to trust him completely. She was even willing to give him such a thing, making him feel somewhat uncomfortable. Originally, he thought that he would help as much as he could and try his best. If he really wasn't a match for them, he could only retreat. However, seeing that Mia seemed to have placed all her hopes on him, he felt a little uncomfortable running away if he really couldn't kill the 7 Seas Dragon King. You trust people so easily. If you really meet a bad guy in the future, you might even count the money for them after being sold. Zhou sighed inwardly and put away the dragon pearl companion egg before leaving the Sea God Reef dimensional zone. I should let Feng Qiuyan know about this first. Otherwise, I won't be able to kill the Seven Seas Dragon King. Once the Seven Seas Dragon King takes revenge, I wonder if the entire Feng family will be implicated because of Qinling Zhou decided to return to the Feng family first. After telling Feng Qiuyan about this matter, it wouldn't be too late to head to the other 6-dimensional zones in the Seven Dragons Sea. Just as Zhou left Sea God Reef, he happened to bump into someone. The person was walking in the direction of Sea God Reef. When she saw Zhou, she was taken aback. "Are you going to the Dragon Palace?" Zhou asked her. This person was naturally Qinling. She clearly wanted to go to Sea God Reef. "What Dragon Palace? I just want to go to Sea God Reef to hunt dimensional creatures," Qinling said. "I've met Mia," Zhou said. Qinling's expression immediately changed as she bit her lip and stared at Zhou. "Will you tell Qiuyan about me?" "Yes," Zhou answered with certainty. Qinling's pupils immediately constricted as she stared intently at Zhou. A terrifying aura rose from her body as her originally black pupils turned golden. Even faint golden scales began to appear on her skin. Her strength was clearly not as simple as the ordinary epic stage. She had half of the Golden Dragon's bloodline. Apart from the epic strength of humans, there was an even more terrifying power hidden in her body. Zhou didn't know if a mixed blood like her could inherit all the Golden Dragon's strength. Even if she couldn't, her body would be much stronger than an ordinary human's. "Don't tell Qiuyan about this," Qinling said through gritted teeth as she stared at Zhou. "He has the right to know." Zhou looked at Qinling without backing down. Qinling's eyes burned with killing intent as she slowly raised her palm. Her fingernails turned pale golden like sharp daggers. However, in the end, Qinling lowered her hand and her body gradually returned to her original human appearance. "Leave. You can tell Qiuyan that I won't return," Qinling said as she turned around and walked towards the Sea God Reef dimensional zone. "Will you be willing to give up just like that? Why don't you give it a try?" "Perhaps Feng Qiuyan doesn't mind," Zhou said as he looked at Qinling's back. "How can he not mind? I'm not human, I'm a monster. No one can accept a monster like me as a wife. When he was very young, he saw my true body once and was already frightened once. Why should I let him scare me a second time?" As Qinling spoke, she rushed into the Sea God Reef dimensional zone. Zhou watched Qinling's figure disappear into the fog when he heard someone sigh not far away. "I never expected little Yanyan's fiancé to really not be human." Li Xian walked over and saw the message Zhou had left him. He had originally come to find Zhou, but he never expected to hear their conversation. "You are better at talking than me. I'll let you tell Feng Qiuyan about this," Zhou said to Li Xian. "I've never liked to say sad things. It's best you tell him yourself." Li Xian shook his head and refused. It might not be a bad thing. As Zhou spoke, he walked in the direction of the Feng family. There were some things that he ultimately had to face. Furthermore, Zhou felt that Feng Qiuyan was already mentally prepared. The two of them returned to the Feng family and found Feng Qiuyan. "Coach, you were the one who killed the giant crab at sea, right? Now, all of Sea Return is discussing your deeds. They want to know who you are," Feng Qiuyan said. "Let's talk about this in the future. Is there anywhere we can talk?" "I have something to tell you," Zhou said. "Follow me." Feng Qiuyan quickly brought the two of them to a small building. Then, he looked at Zhou and asked, "Coach, just say it directly. Qinling is indeed not human. She has half the bloodline of a dimensional creature," Zhou said directly. Chapter 967. Little Yanyan, you don't have to be sad. Actually, Li Xian wanted to comfort Feng Qiuyan, but Feng Qiuyan didn't show any expression that required his comfort. "What's the other half of her bloodline?" Feng Qiuyan asked calmly. "Sea God Reef's Golden Dragon King bloodline," Zhou answered Feng Qiuyan. "I see. My memories from back then weren't wrong. I saw strange horns on her head and scales on her body," Feng Qiuyan muttered to himself. When I returned, I met Qin Ling. She told me to tell you that she has gone to see God Reef, and will never return again. Zhou conveyed Qin Ling's words to Feng Chuyan. That's good too. Feng Chuyan nodded slightly. Following that, Zhou told Feng Chuyan about the Seven Seas Dragon King, without missing a word. Who the hell is that Seven Seas Dragon King? I don't care if it occupies the monsters in the sea, but it actually wants to target a human beauty. Damn it. I can't tolerate it. Old Zhou, if you want to kill that Seven Seas Dragon King, count me in, Li Xian said. However, Feng Chuyan didn't say a word. He turned around and left the building, but he didn't leave the Feng family. From the looks of it, little Yan Yan has suffered a huge blow, Li Xian said with a sigh. People have to suffer some blows to grow. It's not a bad thing, Zhou said thoughtfully. I'm just afraid the blow will be too great. Li Xian shook his head slightly. Don't feel wistful here. Aren't you going to kill the Seven Seas Dragon King? What are you waiting for? Go prepare. We are about to set off, Zhou said. Are we really going? Li Xian asked with widened eyes. Didn't you say that you couldn't tolerate it? Zhou said with a smile. I was just going along with the atmosphere back then. That's an old Terragrade monster. Didn't you say so? Only a Terragrade can kill a Terragrade. The two of us aren't at the Terragrade. Wouldn't we be sending ourselves to our deaths if we went? Li Xian said. Alright, we're just going to finish off the other ordinary dragon monarchs first. It's not like we're killing the Seven Seas Dragon King. Zhou rolled his eyes at him. The two of them left the Feng family and headed for the seaside again. When they arrived at the seaside, Li Xian looked back and couldn't help but feel slightly disappointed when he didn't see Feng Chuyan. Let's go. In an empty spot, Zhou summoned Deep Blue Crab Sovereign and got Li Xian to sit with him. A gravity bubble appeared on the Deep Blue Crab Sovereign's body. A hemispherical bubble appeared on its back, protecting the trio from the impact of the seawater. The Deep Blue Crab Sovereign wasn't slow at all. It moved in the water as though it was flying. Furthermore, it wasn't walking horizontally. It was also walking forward normally, a little like a spider. The first-dimensional zone Zhou wanted to head to was what humans called the underwater blue hole. From the surface of the sea presented a unique blue color. It seemed very different from the surrounding seawater, making it look like a blue hole. In fact, the seawater there was the same color as the surrounding seawater. The only difference was that there was a bottomless cave at the bottom of the sea. As it was underwater, it was very difficult for humans to fight at the bottom of the sea for long periods of time. Therefore, very few humans entered the underwater blue hole. According to Mia's intelligence, there was a sea snake in the underwater blue hole dimensional zone. The sea snake was extremely venomous. As it had a sliver of dragon bloodline, it also claimed to be the Sea Dragon King. In the underwater blue hole, there were a large number of venomous sea snakes. The venom of these sea snakes was extremely potent. Once one was injured, the snake venom would enter one's body from the wound. Perhaps not many humans could withstand it. Zhou poison stat was very high. Furthermore, he cultivated a poison-type essence energy skill, so he wasn't afraid of poison. Li Xian had the indestructible golden body and fused with Alpha's carapace, so he likely wouldn't care about ordinary sea snakes. He needed to be careful of the Sea Dragon King. However, Zhou had already learned of the Sea Dragon King's weakness from Mia. He had brought Li Xian here because he wanted to use Li Xian's strength to safely finish off the Sea Dragon King. Although Zhou could settle it himself, it would be more troublesome. After all, reality wasn't a game. Zhou didn't wish for any accidents to happen. After we enter the underwater blue hole, leave the ordinary sea snakes to me. You don't have to worry about them. When the Sea Dragon King comes out, I'll hold it back first. Then, you can release the ice silkworm and use it to lower its temperature. Zhou told Li Xian his plan. The Sea Dragon King had almost no natural enemies in the water. The only thing it was afraid of was the cold. If the temperature was too low, its body would stiffen. Zhouwen didn't have any mythical ice elemental pets, so he could only rely on Li Xian's ice silkworm. When he arrived at the entrance of the underwater blue hole, Zhouwen looked around and couldn't help but be disappointed when he didn't find the tiny palm symbol. Quite a number of sea snakes had already appeared near the blue hole. These sea snakes looked rather strange. Their bodies were flat and they looked about the same as ribbonfish, but they were more than 10 meters long. Furthermore, their bodies were blue in color. They blended in with the environment, making it difficult to discover them. When the sea snakes approached, there was no need for Zhouwen to do anything. The crab sovereign brandished its pincers and cut the sea snakes into two. No sea snakes could approach them. After entering the blue hole, a large number of sea snakes appeared in front of Zhouwen and company. Seeing countless sea snakes squirming in the seawater, the scene left one's hair standing on end. The crab sovereign spewed out a large number of gravity bubbles. The moment the sea snakes encountered the gravity bubbles, they were sucked into the bubbles. Then, as though they had lost gravity, they floated in the bubbles, unable to rush out no matter what. There were many sea snakes, but there were even more gravity bubbles. A large number of sea snakes were trapped by the gravity bubbles and couldn't rush over. Suddenly, a strange sea snake with blue scales and a length of nearly 100 meters with a horn on its head rushed out of the blue hole's depth. Its eyes were filled with anger as it stared coldly at the crab sovereign. How ugly! That seven seas dragon king sure has hardcore taste. He can even lay his hands on such a harem beauty. Li Xian couldn't help but lampoon when he saw the sea dragon king's appearance. He's a dragon. His aesthetic standards are different from ours. Zhouwen wasn't in a hurry to attack when he saw the sea dragon king charge over. All he did was order the crab sovereign to continue spewing out gravity bubbles. Thankfully, Qin Ling isn't this fellow's sister, Li Xian said with a strange expression. The sea dragon king was fearless as its body smashed through the gravity bubbles. It opened its terrifying snake mouth and was about to swallow both man and crab. The crab sovereign raised its pincers with all its might and clamped down on its jaw. However, the sea dragon king's strength was just too great. It forcefully pressed down, causing the crab sovereign's pincers to gradually lower. It was no match for the sea dragon king. Zhouwen summoned Sword Pill and transformed into a stream of light that stabbed at the sea dragon king's eyes. At the same time, he gave Li Xian a look. Without any hesitation, Li Xian summoned the two ice silkworms. While the sea dragon king was paying attention to Sword Pill, the male and female ice silkworms landed on the sea dragon king's body from the left and right like leeches. Chapter 968. The two ice silkworms stuck to the sea dragon king's body. The sea dragon king immediately shivered as its actions became a little unnatural. It struggled to escape the ice silkworms on its body. However, the crab sovereign clamped its head tightly, making it difficult for the sea dragon king to escape. As for its body, it became stiffer and stiffer. What a powerful ice silkworm! Zhouwen could see with his naked eye that frost was spreading on the sea dragon king's scales. The sea dragon king's body was also stiffening. Before long, the gigantic sea dragon king lost its combat ability. It was as though it had entered hibernation as its body stiffened. Indeed, it's better to have restraining effects when killing monsters. Zhouwen didn't even need to take action because the crab sovereign had finished it off because the sea dragon king couldn't fight back. The two ice silkworms were still stuck to the sea snake king's body. The blood in the sea snake king's body had already frozen. The crab sovereign's two giant pincers took quite a while before finally splitting the sea snake king's body into two. However, it only discovered a stat crystal. How stingy! It didn't even drop a companion egg, Li Xian said gloomily. How can a companion egg drop so easily? However, Zhouwen was already used to it. After putting away the stat crystal, he looked at the bottomless blue hole below. After some thought, he said, "Since we're here, Let's go down and take a look. The crab sovereign led the three of them into the depths of the blue hole. There were many sea snakes around, but with the crab sovereign's gravity bubble opening the way, none of them could approach them. This blue hole is so deep. I'm afraid it's about to reach the other side of Earth, right? The crab sovereign dived for quite a while, but it still failed to reach the bottom of the blue hole. The blue hole seemed bottomless. At this depth, even the sea snakes didn't appear again. Most sea snakes lived in snake holes on the rock walls, but at this depth they couldn't even see the snake holes. There seems to be something down there? Li Xian lay by the side of the crab sovereign's body and looked down as though he had seen something. Zhou Wen looked over as well, and indeed, he saw a crystalline jade blue below, as though a crystal cave was glowing. However, crystals needed to reflect light. It was naturally impossible for there to be light in such a deep sea. The crab sovereign dived deeper and deeper, and the blue light gradually became clearer. Only then did the two realize that it was a thick glacier. Strange, isn't the sea dragon king afraid of the cold? Why would it live in such a cold place? Li Xian asked in puzzlement. There must be a reason. Maybe the secret is in the glacier. The ice definitely won't emit light by itself. There might be something inside the ice, Zhou Wen said as he sized up the glacier below. Could it be the snake egg laid by the sea dragon king? If it's a snake egg, perhaps it can be domesticated like a goo. Li Xian reached his hand into the water and touched the glacier. He was immediately given a fright. The glacier was extremely cold. Just touching it nearly froze his fingers. The sea dragon king is so afraid of the cold, how could he lay his eggs here? With such low temperatures, I don't think the sea dragon king dares to approach since he's so afraid of the cold, right? Zhou Wen ordered Crab Sovereign to dig the ice. The Crab Sovereign had a high resistance to the cold. Under Zhou Wen's orders, it brandished its huge crab pincers and quickly smashed open the glacier. More and more ice cubes were dug up as Zhou Wen and company finally saw what the blue light was. Is this a tooth? The Sea Dragon King's tooth? The thing emitting blue light in the glacier was a blue tooth that was more than a meter long. It looked like it was carved from ice. You can tell it's not just by looking. Zhou Wen got the Crab Sovereign to grab the tooth. After catching it, he immediately felt a chill coming from the tooth. Almost instantly, Zhou Wen's hands froze into ice. Clang! Zhou Wen hurriedly threw the tooth on the Crab Sovereign's back and couldn't help but be alarmed. With his physical strength and essence energy, he was instantly frozen into ice. The cold aura emitted from the tooth was in no way inferior to a mythical creature's strike. This thing, could it be? Zhou Wen thought of a possibility. What is it? Li Xian asked. Typical dimensional creatures, even mythical creatures, will rot and decompose after death. Only a small number of creatures' corpses can be stored for long periods of time, but it's impossible for them to maintain the strength they had when they were alive. Unless this is the corpse of a terror-grade creature, the terror form can preserve the terrifying terror power. It won't rot and decompose so easily, Zhou Wen said. In that case, this is a tooth that has transformed into a terror form? What creature does it belong to? It can't be the Seven Seas Dragon King, right? Li Xian said. Zhou Wen looked at the tooth and said, it might not be impossible. The Sea Dragon King is clearly afraid of the cold, but there's such a tooth here. I don't think it's likely that the Sea Dragon King placed it here. Perhaps the Seven Seas Dragon King placed it here to suppress it. Who cares who placed it here? Since it's something good, let's take it away first. What use do you think this thing has? Can it be made into a weapon? Li Xian said. I don't know. I don't know much about the Terrorgrade. I only heard that the Terrorgrade is a true mythical creature. Perhaps the materials on a Terrorgrade creature are really useful. Zhou Wen put on the dragon scale armor and forcefully sent the ice blue tooth into the chaos bead. Although it was only a short period of time, a layer of frost formed on the dragon scale armor on his hands. He got the crab sovereign to dig deeper into the glacier, but he didn't find anything. This was not surprising because, other than the tooth, there was no more light in the glacier. Seeing that there was nothing else in the blue hole, Zhou ordered the crab sovereign to take them out of the blue hole. "Where are we going next?" Li Xian asked. "Let's go to Evil Dragon Island. I heard from Mia that there's a dragon monarch that looks like a crocodile there. Its defense and combat strength are extremely astonishing, and it's not afraid of the cold. The ice silkworm won't be of use this time, but I've already thought of a way to kill it. It shouldn't be difficult," Zhou said as he ordered the crab sovereign to head for Evil Dragon Island. No humans dared to approach such an island in the sea. Even the great devils overseas wouldn't casually enter such a place. According to Mia's intelligence, Zhou and company easily found Evil Dragon Island and the Dragon Monarch. It indeed looked like a crocodile, but it wasn't completely like a crocodile. Its body was much longer than a crocodile's, and there were horns on its head. It could barely be considered a dragon. Zhou used Mia's intelligence to know that the dragon was afraid of poison. He used the invisibility cloak to sneak over and stabbed it in the eye. When it opened its mouth in pain, he threw the poisonous hair transformed from fatal temptation into its mouth. It didn't take long for the evil dragon to die. After cutting open its body, there was nothing. "This fellow is even more petty than the previous one." As Li Xian spoke, his eyes suddenly lit up. "Old Zhou, do you think there's a tooth here?" Searching Dog. Chapter 969. It can't be. Zhou found it impossible. Let's search. Maybe there's something? Li Xian began searching in the dragon's lair. Zhou originally felt that there was no hope, but to his surprise, Li Xian really found something. There's actually something. Look here. There's also an ice layer like the one below the blue hole. Li Xian's voice sounded from the dragon's lair. Zhou went over to take a look and realized that there was a thick layer of ice in a stone cave. There was an icy blue glow inside. It really does seem like it. Zhou was somewhat surprised as he got the crab sovereign to dig the ice layer. At the same time, he said, "If there's such a tooth here, this matter won't be that simple." Li Xian nodded. "The Sea Dragon King is afraid of the cold. It's possible to place a tooth there to suppress it, but this dragon isn't afraid of the cold at all. There's no reason to place one here." With that said, Li Xian's eyes suddenly lit up. "By the way, didn't you say that the 7 dragon monarchs are the 7 Seas Dragon King's harem? Do you think this tooth is a keepsake that the 7 Seas Dragon King gave to his concubine? Seeing a tooth is like seeing a dragon?" "How would I know? Let's wait until we dig it out." Zhou shook his head helplessly. Soon, the crab sovereign dug out something again, but it wasn't a tooth they had imagined. Instead, it was a bone. It looked like a rib, but it was only a broken section. It didn't look complete. Although it was a bone, its composition was similar to a tooth. It was icy blue like a crystal. It was obvious that it had been taken from the same creature. "Don't tell me the 7 Seas Dragon King removed his rib as a token of love?" Zhou said as he looked at the rib. "From the looks of it, the tooth and rib shouldn't be the 7 Seas Dragon King's. However, apart from the 7 Seas Dragon King, are there any other Terragrade creatures in the 7 Dragon Sea? Why are the things on its body in the lairs of the 2 dragon monarchs?" Li Xian stroked his chin and thought. "We can go to the other dragon monarchs to take a look. Perhaps there are similar things in their lairs. If that's the case, it will be really interesting," Zhou said. "Why?" Li Xian asked in puzzlement. "I heard that deities are born because of human fear. Therefore, as long as human fear exists, deities are immortal existences. They will never die. This is also the origin of the Terragrade." Zhou paused for a moment before continuing. "I don't know if the legend is true, but from the looks of it, these teeth and bones still contain a terrifying terror transformation power. If we can really find all of its bones, do you think it will suddenly come back to life?" Don't scare me. It wasn't easy for us to find these bones and teeth. If we were to be bitten to death by it after it revives, wouldn't that make us look stupid? Li Xian said. If the nests of other dragon monarchs really have other parts, do you think we should dig them up? Zhou asked Li Xian. Dig. Of course we have to dig. These terraform teeth and bones are definitely valuable. If every dragon monarch has some terraform items, we won't dig them all out at most. I often see it on TV. Those devils who want to revive need to find their bodies. As long as their bodies aren't complete, they can't revive, Li Xian said with a smile. That makes sense. Zhou didn't care. At most, he would place them in the chaos space. Even if the owner of the teeth and bones really revived, they wouldn't be able to cause much trouble in the chaos space. If something major really happened, Zhou could still let the owner of the bones meet Ice Maiden trapped in the chaos bead, and let them fight to the death. Therefore, the two of them went to another few dimensional zones. On the way, they avoided some terrifying forbidden areas. Soon, the two of them killed 2 more dragon monarchs. In the end, they really found something similar where the 2 dragon monarchs were. In a nest, they found a strand of crystal-like hair. In another nest, they found a broken horn. It was also as cold as ice crystals. It likely came from the same creature as the teeth and bones from before. Why do I feel like we are the villains who are reviving the Demon King? Li Xian said with a strange expression. How can we be villains? Villains have righteous partners who do everything possible to stop them from reviving the Demon King. How can villains be as successful as us? Zhou said with a smile. That's true. Li Xian thought for a moment before asking, where are we going next? The nearest dimensional zone is the Deathwater Zone. There will be some trouble there. The seawater in the Deathwater Zone is affected by the dimensional zone. Any creature that enters will sink. Even if they can fly, it's useless inside. They can only keep sinking. The biggest obstacle to killing the lobster-like dragon monarch inside is the Deathwater Zone itself, Zhou said. You're good at this. Yer and I will wait for you outside, Li Xian said. When they arrived near the Deathwater Zone, Zhou got Crab Sovereign to stay outside to protect Li Xian and Yer while he put on the invisibility cloak and entered the Deathwater Zone. With the protection of the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder, the Deathwater Zone couldn't make Zhou drown. At the same time, Zhou used the Grand Turtle Breathing spell to converge his vitality. The lobster-like dragon monarch was really blind. It could only rely on its vital aura to determine the location of creatures. Zhou's Grand Turtle Breathing spell happened to restrain it. Not only was the Deathwater Zone's water not black, but it was even more crystalline, as though it was pure water without any impurities. There were no dimensional creatures in the water. Apart from the dragon monarch, ordinary dimensional creatures didn't have the ability to swim in the Deathwater Zone. They were all at the bottom of the sea. When ordinary people entered the Deathwater Zone, they would quickly sink and be eaten by them. Zhou naturally didn't have any qualms. He quickly swam through the Deathwater Zone. Under the cover of the invisibility cloak and Grand Turtle Breathing spell, he easily passed through the Deathwater Zone and found the Dragon Monarch. When he saw the Dragon Monarch, Zhou couldn't help but be surprised. The Dragon Monarch was much more beautiful than he had imagined. Although it looked like a lobster, the shell on its body was sparkling and translucent, showing a mysterious sapphire color. There were countless streams of light flickering like stars inside. When it was motionless, it was like a sapphire work of art that was focused by starlight. Mia said that not only is its carapace beautiful, but it's also hard. If I want to kill it, I can only attack it from the inside. Zhou approached the huge lobster invisibly. At the same time, he summoned the ancient splitting tadpole and stuffed it into its mouth in the form of a grenade. Boom! As the ancient splitting tadpole constantly exploded, the lobster's body constantly tumbled. Minced meat spewed out of its mouth, but its carapace remained undamaged. Ding! With the death of the lobster, a companion egg dropped. Chapter 970. It's finally a companion egg. Zhouwen was delighted as he hurriedly picked up the companion egg. Then, he used the mysterious phone to look at its information in the water. Galaxy Shell Dragon, Mythical Life Providence, Unbreakable Life Soul, Star Array Wheel of Destiny, Absolute Defense Strength, 80 Speed, 80 Constitution, 81 Essence Energy, 80 Talent Skill. Deathwater Zone, Dragon Head Raising, Ghost Armor Companion Form, Armor. There's actually an attribute of 81. Zhouwen was somewhat surprised. Unless it was an excellent grade mythical companion beast, it was impossible for it to reach 81 points. The Galaxy Shell Dragon actually had an attribute of 81 points. This meant that it had already broken through the limits in a certain aspect. It was considered an excellent grade mythical companion beast. Zhouwen looked at its stats and abilities and was very curious about absolute defense. Zhouwen had only seen Tyrant Behemoth's absolute strength in the Absolute series of Wheel of Destiny. The Galaxy Shell Dragon's Wheel of Destiny was very similar to Tyrant Behemoth. He didn't know if it had the same level of strength. There was nothing else to say. It looked like a defense-type companion beast. Now that Zhouwen had the dragon scale armor, he didn't have much need for defense-type mythical companion beasts. However, Zhouwen still hatched it and summoned it in armor form. He wanted to see if such a purely defense-type companion beast armor had higher defense. When the armor appeared on Zhouwen, he couldn't help but be surprised. A translucent blue armor that shimmered with blurry starlight appeared on Zhouwen's body, tightly wrapping around his body. It accentuated his slender and muscular figure, making him look like a god surrounded by starlight. Ignoring the defense, just the appearance of this armor has already won against the dragon scale armor. Zhouwen still remembered the matter of the terror creature's material, so he wore the armor and searched the vicinity. The dimensional creatures at the bottom of the sea rushed over. Zhouwen wanted to test the armor's strength, so he didn't retaliate and allowed them to attack. The ordinary dimensional creatures couldn't damage the armor at all. From the looks of it, I have to fight a mythical creature to know how strong this armor's defense is. Zhouwen searched the vicinity for a while and indeed found the ice layer. After digging up the ice layer, he discovered a scale fragment. Just like the materials from before, it was extremely cold. Zhouwen stored it in the chaos space. After leaving the Deathwater Zone, Li Xian and Yer were still waiting for him outside. The three of them continued on their way. I found another scale. It's really the first dragon monarch to have the same material. I'm wondering if Mia has such an item as well, Zhouwen said. Teeth, bones, hair, horns, and scales. The more I look at it, the more it looks like I'm reviving a divine dragon. When I gather the other two ingredients, could it be that I can summon a divine dragon and make a wish? Li Xian quipped. There's still the last dragon monarch left. After we finish this dragon monarch, we'll go to Mia and ask her. She might know what these things are for. After a pause, Zhouwen continued, however, the final dragon monarch is a little troublesome. She seems to be a hybrid between a clam and a dragon. She's known as a dragon granny, but she's actually a clam lady with some dragon bloodline. However, her abilities are somewhat special. She can suck people into her shell and trap them to death. Furthermore, I heard that the Seven Seas Dragon King often lives at her place. I'm afraid that I'll bump into the Seven Seas Dragon King when I go. It will be troublesome when that happens. Then what should we do? Li Xian also knew that this wasn't a joke. If he really encountered a Terragrade Seven Seas Dragon King, he would die. Infinite Island, where Dragon Granny lives, is relatively close to the beach. Let's return first. Then, I'll sneak up to Infinite Island and take a look at the situation. Zhouwen didn't dare be careless. That's the only way. Li Xian nodded as the three of them returned to the beach. Since we have to return, why don't we go to Mia's place first and ask her what these materials are for? Li Xian was curious and couldn't help it. All right. Zhou thought that it wouldn't waste much time, so he took a detour to see God Reef. This was the first time Li Xian had seen the shrimp soldiers and crab generals. He was very curious and said in puzzlement, "Strange. Why does Mia's place look like a real dragon monarch's place? The other dragon monarchs are basically a mob. They don't look like what a dragon monarch should have. They don't even have shrimp soldiers and crab generals. I find it a little strange too. Perhaps Mia's bloodline is really different. She is indeed the creature that looks the most like a dragon among the 7 dragon monarchs," Zhou said. When the two of them arrived at the beach, the shrimp soldiers and crab generals took them into the Dragon Palace. In the Dragon Palace, not only did they see Mia, but they also saw Qin Ling standing beside her. Li Xian secretly observed for a while, and didn't see Feng Qiuyan here. He didn't mention it again, and only greeted Qin Ling. "Why did you return so quickly? Did you encounter some trouble?" Mia didn't mention Qin Ling as she asked Zhou in puzzlement. "We've already eliminated 5 dragon monarchs. Now, only Dragon Granny hasn't been dealt with. As I was afraid that I would encounter the 7 Seas Dragon King at Dragon Granny's place, I didn't rashly head over," Zhou said. "You actually killed the Galaxy Shell Dragon and the others so quickly?" Mia looked at Zhou in disbelief. "I did. Furthermore, I discovered something strange at the Sea Dragon King's place, so I wanted to ask you if you know what this is." Zhou took out the tooth and placed it on the ground. The floor of the cabin immediately froze. Furthermore, the frost rapidly spread throughout the cabin. The cold air on the tooth was just too strong. "This is the Dragon King's tooth?" Mia sized it up for a while before her expression gradually changed to one of surprise. "You said that this is the tooth of the 7 Seas Dragon King?" Zhou asked. Mia shook her head. "It's not the Dragon Sea Dragon King. I heard that the 7 Dragon Seas originally had a true dragon. After the 7 Seas Dragon King came, he killed the true dragon and seized the position of overlord of the 7 Dragon Seas. However, these are only legends. I originally didn't believe it, but when I saw this tooth, I believed it a little. This is clearly a dragon tooth after the terror transformation. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for it to be preserved. In the entire 7 Dragon Seas, apart from the 7 Seas Dragon King, only the legendary true dragon can reach the terror grade. Furthermore, it's rumored that it's an ice elemental true dragon." "I see." Zhou looked at Mia and asked, "We discovered some things at the other dragon monarchs' places. Don't tell me you have something from the true dragon here?" Mia shook her head and said, "Maybe, but I've never seen it. The original Dragon Palace of Sea God Reef wasn't here. During the battle between my father and the 7 Seas Dragon King, the original Dragon Palace was destroyed, so I moved here. If you are interested, I can take you to the original Dragon Palace to take a look." Sogu. Chapter 971. The original location of the Dragon Palace was now in ruins. There were broken coral reefs everywhere. According to Mia, the original Dragon Palace was a coral palace, but now there was nothing left. All that was left was this ruin. Mia didn't want to live in this sad place, so she stayed in the sunken ship. Zhou got the crab sovereign to dig up the coral reefs to search for ice that might exist. He never expected to really find it. Beneath a coral reef, a blue ice layer appeared. After digging it open, he found a blue crystal that looked like an eyeball. Mia said that it might be the Dragon King's dragon eye. As Mia didn't know what these things were for, Zhou had no choice but to put them away. He had a nagging feeling that these things would be of some use. After leaving Sea God Reef, the more Li Xian thought about it, the more he felt that something was amiss. "Old Zhou, I think something's amiss." "What's amiss?" Zhou asked. If that Terragrade True Dragon was really killed by the 7 Seas Dragon King, why would the Terragrade items on its body be hidden in the lairs of the 7 Dragon Monarchs? Even if the Seven Seas Dragon King doesn't need these materials, there's no need for him to go through so much trouble to hide them in 7 different places, right? Li Xian said. It's indeed a little strange. Perhaps the 7 dragon monarchs participated in the battle back then. These terror items might be a reward from the Seven Seas Dragon King. Zhou had also thought of this problem. How can these fellows help in a terrorgrade battle? Li Xian pondered for a moment before his eyes suddenly lit up. Do you think these 7 dragon monarchs were originally subordinates of that ice elemental true dragon? In the end, they betrayed the ice elemental true dragon and submitted to the Seven Seas Dragon King. That's why they obtained these terror items as rewards? It's possible. Zhou felt that it was indeed possible. I still feel that something's amiss. Li Xian frowned and continued thinking. After returning to Return City, Zhou got Yer to temporarily follow Li Xian. He planned on heading to Infinite Island to take a look. If the Seven Seas Dragon King wasn't there, he could take the opportunity to kill Dragon Granny. However, before he went, Zhou sent a message to the Dharch. He wanted to ask if the terror grade materials were of any use. Where did you get the terror item? The Dharch quickly replied. Zhou roughly explained the matter of the 7 dragons before asking the Dharch. If all the terror items are found, will this terror creature revive? How can it be that easy to revive? However, those terror items are considered very good materials due to the existence of the power of terror. Since it's useless for you to keep them, why don't you give them to me for experiment? The Dharch said. How is it useless? I still plan on using these materials to make weapons. A weapon made from a terror item should be very powerful, right? Zhou hurriedly said. Do you think it's scrap metal? You can make weapons out of them by simply burning and beating them? Different terror items have different uses. As you said, those are ice elemental terror items. It's best to use them as refrigerators to store experimental items at low temperatures, the Dharch said. Zhou didn't know if what the Dharch said was true. In any case, Zhou was definitely unwilling to use those terror items to build refrigerators. After chatting with the Dharch for a while, he didn't obtain any useful information. Just as Zhou was about to head to Infinite Island, he suddenly saw a violent gust of wind on the surface of the sea. The waves transformed into a huge tsunami that surged towards the coast. Large numbers of dimensional creatures rushed onto land with the tsunami. Another dimensional creature tide? Zhou was alarmed as he felt that something was amiss. This dimensional creature tide was much more terrifying than the previous crab tide. Many dimensional creatures in the water found it difficult to unleash their combat strength on land. However, this time, the seawater surged and rushed onto land. Many sea creatures that couldn't enter land rushed up as well. Could it be that the Seven Seas Dragon King wants revenge after discovering that the 5 dragon monarchs are dead? Zhou was secretly alarmed. Return City was the first to bear the brunt of the attack. The terrifying tsunami even crossed the high walls and surged into Return City. One could see shark-like dimensional creatures charging through the city with the waves. Thankfully, the people who remained in Return City were all wealthy and prosperous families. There weren't many commoners left. Most of them had a certain level of combat strength, so there weren't too many casualties. However, as the tsunami constantly attacked, more and more marine dimensional creatures rushed up. The situation was extremely bad. Thankfully, he hadn't discovered any mythical dimensional creatures. Zhou estimated that he had killed most of the mythical creatures in the 7 Dragons Sea. Even if there were mythical creatures, there weren't many. After putting on the invisibility cloak, Zhou flew towards the sea, hoping to see what power had triggered the tsunami. Typical mythical creatures definitely couldn't create such a tsunami. Zhou guessed that the 7 Seas Dragon King had come himself. Flying far into the sky, Zhou didn't dare get too close to the sea. If the 7 Seas Dragon King really came, he still had room to escape. The tsunami came wave after wave. Soon, Zhou saw the source of the tsunami. He saw huge, strange dragons stirring up waves in the sea. The reason why he called them strange dragons was that although they looked like dragons, they didn't completely resemble dragons. They did have dragon faces, but there were no scales on their bodies. Instead, they had smooth skin that looked extremely tough. Furthermore, Zhouwen didn't see any dragon claws on them. Instead of calling them dragons, they looked more like snakes, but they didn't look like snakes. There were strange rings on their abdomens. From the looks of it, it's the 7 Seas Dragon King. Zhouwen counted, and indeed, there were 7 of them. However, their tails were under the sea, making it impossible to tell what they looked like. As Zhouwen was sizing up the 7 Seas Dragon King, the 7 Seas Dragon King seemed to discover Zhouwen in midair. The strange dragons raised their heads and looked at the invisible Zhouwen. "I've been discovered." Zhouwen was alarmed as he saw the 7 strange dragons spew out white liquid at him. The liquid was clearly not ordinary water. It was probably the mucus that Mia had mentioned. Once touched, one would be unable to move. Zhouwen quickly dodged and didn't touch the white liquid. The 7 Seas Dragon King was enraged when he saw this. His body rose out of the water as though he wanted to rush out of the sea to attack Zhouwen. As the 7 Seas Dragon King's body rose, the seawater flowed to the side. Zhouwen finally saw the lower part of the 7 Seas Dragon King, and his expression turned odd. Chapter 972. That's not a dragon, it's a huge octopus monster, and the 7 strange dragons are its 7 tentacles. However, it was different from ordinary octopuses. Its tentacles had a dragon head, as well as a mouth, eyes, ears, tongue, and nose. It looked like an octopus or a dragon. It looked extremely strange and evil. The enraged 7 Seas Dragon King revealed most of its body out of the water. Its tentacles spewed out white liquid into the air, hoping to strike Zhouwen down. Although it was very fast, Zhouwen wasn't slow either. Furthermore, he was very far from the surface of the sea. The 7 Seas Dragon King couldn't touch his body for a moment. Seeing that it couldn't hit Zhouwen, the 7 Seas Dragon King suddenly stopped and retracted its 7 tentacles. When Zhouwen saw the 7 Seas Dragon King's posture, he found it inexplicably odd. Its present appearance was like a sitting Buddha. Its 7 tentacles were bent into a motionless state, as though it was forming a seal. Zhouwen could even vaguely hear the chanting of scriptures coming from the 7 Seas Dragon King's body. With the strange chanting, the 7 Seas Dragon King's entire body seemed to fall into a fog, preventing anyone from seeing it clearly. No good. Zhouwen felt something amiss. He wanted to fly away, but it was already too late. A boundless fog rose up in the surroundings. It was as if the entire world was shrouded in fog. Moreover, the chanting of sutras continued to echo in their ears. Illusion? Mental attack? Or some special power? Zhouwen wasn't sure what power the 7 Seas Dragon King was using, but there was no doubt that it was a Terragrade power. Zhouwen used teleportation to teleport out of the fog, but just as he teleported out, he realized that not only was he unable to teleport out of the fog, but he was also sent in front of the 7 Seas Dragon King. The 7 Seas Dragon King swallowed Zhouwen, who was about to reach its mouth. Zhouwen felt a terrifying suction force pull his body towards the 7 Seas Dragon King's abdomen. Zhouwen wanted to teleport again, but he realized that this seemed to be a sealed space. He couldn't teleport out. Plop! Zhouwen's body fell into the white liquid. In an instant, the dragon scale armor he wore was stuck to the white liquid. He couldn't break free no matter how hard he tried. Soon, his entire body sank into the white liquid. After the 7 Seas Dragon King devoured Zhouwen, it sank into the sea in satisfaction and quickly vanished. With the 7 Seas Dragon King's disappearance, the tsunami gradually subsided and the number of dimensional creatures that rushed to the shore gradually decreased. Zhouwen fell into the white liquid and used many methods, but he couldn't escape. Furthermore, he realized that his dragon scale armor was being assimilated by the white liquid. A portion of it had already turned into white liquid. Even the mythical dragon's scale armor couldn't withstand the corrosion of the white liquid. Once the white liquid stuck to his flesh and blood, he felt a chill run down his spine. What I do? Should I release Ice Maiden? Zhou thought of this idea, but he didn't immediately take action. Ice Maiden was a double-edged sword. There were pros and cons to releasing her. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Zhou didn't wish to take that step. He switched a few more essence energy arts, but it was useless. The dragon's scale armor was about to be penetrated. Zhou summoned the Chaos Egg with the intention of giving it a try. However, he didn't have much hope for the Chaos Egg. After all, even the mythical dragon's scale armor couldn't withstand the white liquid. As for the Chaos Egg, it was only an epic life soul. However, to Zhou surprise, when the Chaos Egg enveloped Zhou body, the white liquid didn't corrode it like the dragon's scale armor despite still tightly wrapping around it. Zhou couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief when he saw that the Chaos Egg could isolate the white liquid. I never expected the Chaos Egg to be so magical. Although it doesn't have any offensive strength, its defense is pretty good. Zhou hid in the Chaos Egg and used Truth Listener's ability to pay attention to the commotion outside. The Seven Seas Dragon King was advancing in the sea. From the direction it was heading in, it wasn't Infinite Island where Dragon Granny was. It was unknown where he was going. The Chaos Egg's defense is top-notch, but it can't move or have any offensive strength. How can I escape from here? After some thought, Zhou couldn't think of a good solution. Before long, the Seven Seas Dragon King stopped somewhere. Zhou listened attentively and took in the situation outside. He realized that he was beside a huge underwater rift. Without any hesitation, the Seven Seas Dragon King entered the underwater rift and entered a place that resembled an abyss. In the abyss, Truth Listener's ability couldn't extend too far. It could only hear the nearby situation. After a while, the Seven Seas Dragon King arrived in front of a palace. This octopus monster sure knows how to enjoy life. It actually has such a gorgeous palace in such a place, Zhou thought. However, Zhou soon felt that something was amiss. The Seven Seas Dragon King arrived in front of the palace and made a strange action. It looked like he was bowing. "Come in." A human's voice came from the palace. Why are there humans in such a place? He shouldn't be human, right? Zhou was alarmed and puzzled. The Seven Seas Dragon King entered the palace. At the same time, Zhou had already heard the situation inside the palace. There was really a human inside. The human was dressed in black armor and sat high up on a throne. He looked like an emperor. After the Seven Seas Dragon King entered the palace, he prostrated himself as though he was expressing his humility to the human. "Is it all settled?" the high and mighty man asked casually. The Seven Seas Dragon King couldn't speak, so all he could do was nod his head desperately. Even the dragon head at the front of the tentacles nodded. "That's good. After spending so much time to set up a plan, I've finally produced a human-dragon hybrid. How can I let her escape my control?" The man said indifferently. "Who is this person?" Zhou was alarmed. Zhou was very certain that this man was definitely human. Furthermore, he had signed a contract with a guardian. But even so, it was unbelievable that he could make an existence like the Seven Seas Dragon King submit to him so humbly. The Seven Seas Dragon King nodded repeatedly as though he agreed with the man's words. The man didn't seem willing to communicate with the Seven Seas Dragon King who couldn't speak. He waved his hand and got the Seven Seas Dragon King to retreat to the side. He sat there and played with something in his hand. Zhou couldn't help but be taken aback when he saw it. It was a blue dragon pearl that resembled an ice crystal. It emitted a cold aura and was very similar to the terror item Zhou had previously obtained. Chapter 973. At that moment, a clam maiden leisurely walked into the palace and bowed at the man. Master, everything is normal at Sea God Reef. Qin Ling has been staying in the sunken ship the entire time and hasn't left. This is that dragon granny, right? Zhou thought. The man nodded slightly. Watch over her. I don't want any accidents to happen. Dragon Granny glanced at the Seven Seas Dragon King and said in a demonic tone, Master, that Zhou is Wang Mingyuan's disciple after all. If we kill him just like that, I'm afraid it will be detrimental to your plan if Wang Mingyuan comes looking for trouble. The man said coldly, So what if he's Wang Mingyuan? When I roamed the Federation, who knows where he was? Even if he's lucky enough to become the Lord of the Dragon Gods, it's just a moment of luck. When my plan succeeds, being the Lord of the Dragon Gods means nothing. Both the humans and dragons will acknowledge me as their lord. What should we do with Mia? If she hadn't leaked the background of the other dragon monarchs, Zhou wouldn't have been able to kill them so easily, Dragon Granny asked carefully. Qin Ling is still with her. Ignore her for now. However, to prevent any accidents, we need to let Qin Ling reach adulthood as soon as possible and extract her human dragon bloodline. As the man spoke, he took out an item and threw it to Dragon Granny. He sneered and said, Take this to the sunken ship and let Qin Ling eat it. In less than half a year, her human dragon bloodline will be useful. When the time comes, all humans will be transformed into draconians. It'll be useless even if the other guardians win. Earth will forever be mine. I'll do it now. Dragon Granny took the item and bowed before leaving the hall. Zhou was alarmed when he heard that. This person is even more ruthless than Teacher and Jing Daoxian. Teacher only brought a portion of people into the dimension, and Jing Daoxian only found talented people to experiment on. This fellow actually wants to turn all humans into human dragons. He's too crazy. From his tone, he seems to have been a member of the Federation's upper echelons a long time ago. Who is he? Zhou was somewhat anxious when he thought of how Dragon Granny had already gone to Sea God Reef. However, he could only protect himself now. He couldn't even rush out of the Seven Seas Dragon King's stomach, much less inform Qin Ling go. Guard the 7 dragons, see well. Don't let any outsiders come into contact with Qin Ling. The man waved his hand, gesturing for the Seven Seas Dragon King to leave. Inside Sea God Reef, Qin Ling was talking to Mia. Sister, how can you trust a human so easily? Qin Ling asked. Mia sighed and said, I was blinded by greed. I actually believed that he could defeat the Seven Seas Dragon King. Now, not only is the Seven Seas Dragon King not dead, but he has also lost his life. If I had known, I would have insisted that he take you away from the 7 dragons sea. However, Qin Ling shook her head and said, I won't leave with any human. I don't belong to humans. Mia reached out to rub Qin Ling's head and sighed. If it weren't for the 7 Seas Dragon King, you could stay here forever, but not now. I have to think of a way to get you to leave the 7 dragons sea. You have half a human bloodline, so you still have a chance of breaking through the dimensional zone's restrictions. So what if I go out? Won't I still be looked at like a monster? Qin Ling felt disheartened. Feng Qiuyan already knew about her matter, but he hadn't appeared again. Qin Ling had already given up. Little Feng might not have figured it out yet. Give him some time, Mia said helplessly. In fact, Mia didn't understand Qin Ling's feelings. As she was a pure dragon, she didn't think there was anything wrong with being a dragon. However, Qin Ling was half human. Furthermore, she had grown up in human society. The other half of the dragon bloodline not only gave her strength, but it also gave her immense pressure. As the two of them were talking, a shrimp soldier reported, Master, Dragon Granny is here. Why is she here? Mia thought for a moment and said to Qin Ling, Stay here and don't come out. I'll go see why Dragon Granny is here. With that said, Mia left the cabin and came to the deck. Indeed, she saw Dragon Granny floating in the seawater outside. Dragon Granny, why are you here instead of being on Infinite Island? Mia asked with a cold expression. Several dragon monarchs of the 7 dragons sea have been killed. The dragon monarchs got me to come and see if you are in trouble. If there is, I can help you. As Dragon Granny spoke, she passed through the water curtain and landed on the deck. Thank you for your kind intentions. There's no trouble here. You can return, Mia said expressionlessly. Why are you in such a hurry to chase me away? I heard that your human sister has returned. Why don't I see her? Dragon Granny said with a smile. She's not feeling well and is resting. Please return. Mia didn't have a good impression of Dragon Granny. I'm good at essence energy restoration. I can take a look at her. Take me to her, Dragon Granny said. Don't make me personally take action. Mia stared at Dragon Granny as her voice turned cold. You can give it a try. Dragon Granny remained smiling, not angry at all. Mia didn't stand on ceremony as she threw a punch at Dragon Granny. Mia had inherited the Golden Dragon King's bloodline and strength. The might of this punch was extremely powerful. Even Tyrant Behemoth was inferior. However, Dragon Granny wasn't in a hurry. She took out a small rattle drum from her clamshell and gently shook it twice. Suddenly, Mia lost all the strength in her fist. A golden incantation appeared on her neck like a collar. It strangled her neck as though it was about to snap her neck. Boom! Mia revealed her Golden Dragon King true form. The huge golden dragon body rolled on the deck, but the golden incantation on her neck kept glowing. No matter how Mia struggled, she couldn't escape. As the rattle drum in Dragon Granny's hand accelerated, the incantation on Mia's neck tightened. Mia was already slumped weakly on the deck, her neck about to snap. Sis, what's wrong? Qin Ling ran out and was alarmed when she saw Mia's state. She wanted to help Mia remove the incantation on her neck. However, just as her hand touched the incantation suddenly shrank, causing Mia immense pain. However, she couldn't make a sound. She was about to die. Prime Minister Turtle rushed over with the shrimp and crab soldiers, but Dragon Granny only said indifferently, "If you want her dead, feel free to come." "What do you want?" Qin Ling stared at Dragon Granny and asked. Dragon Granny opened the box in her hand and took out the crystal bottle inside and handed it to Qin Ling. "Drink this and I'll let her go." "What's this?" Qin Ling asked as she looked at the transparent liquid in the crystal bottle. "Poison. A life for a life. Do you dare drink it?" Dragon Granny said with narrowed eyes. Chapter 974. Will you let my sister off if I drink it? Qin Ling said as she looked at the bottle in her hand. Qin Ling, throw it away, Mia said as she struggled. Dragon Granny shook the rattle drum again. Mia was immediately strangled to the point where she couldn't make a sound. All she could do was tremble in pain on the ground. Of course, I, Dragon Granny, have always been a man of my word. Today your sister has offended me, so one of you has to die. Either you or your sister can die. Dragon Granny smiled at Qin Ling and said, "Of course, you can also choose not to drink it. It's the same if your sister dies. After all, she doesn't have the same father as you, nor are you considered sisters, right?" "I'll drink it. Let my sister go," Qin Ling said through gritted teeth. "It's easy for me to kill you. There's no need to lie to you. Drink it and I'll immediately release your sister," Dragon Granny said slowly. Mia couldn't make a sound as she struggled to get up to snatch the bottle from Qin Ling's hand. However, Dragon Granny shook the rattle drum and Mia immediately slumped to the deck, trembling in pain. Mia knew that someone must have done something to her. Otherwise, with Dragon Granny's strength, it was impossible for her to be her match, much less make her so miserable. However, Mia couldn't recall when someone had done something to her. "Stop shaking it." "I'll drink it," Qin Ling said as she opened the bottle and was about to drink the liquid inside. "Don't drink it." With a clear voice, a saber beam slashed at Dragon Granny on the deck. Little phone. Qin Ling was pleasantly surprised when she saw the person. Feng Chuyen was expressionless as he slashed at Dragon Granny with the Life Soul saber in his hand. Dragon Granny's figure swayed as she dodged Feng Chuyen's saber stance. She originally wanted to counterattack, but she realized that Feng Chuyen's saber stance was like a surging river. She couldn't find any flaws. Your saber art isn't bad. Unfortunately, you're too weak. As Dragon Granny spoke, she used a clamshell to block Feng Chuyen's saber. Then, she struck Feng Chuyen's chest and sent him flying. Little Feng. Qin Ling immediately flew over to catch Feng Chuyen, who had flown back. She saw his chest collapse and blood seep out from the corner of his mouth. Sis Ling, I'm sorry I'm late, Feng Chuyen said as usual. You shouldn't have come. Qin Ling checked Feng Chuyen's injuries with a complicated expression. How are you? Qin Ling looked at Mia and Feng Chuyen. She held the bottle and was just as she was about to raise it. She grabbed it and threw it to the ground. Qin Ling looked at Mia and Feng Chuyen. She held the bottle and was just about to raise it when Feng Chuyen grabbed it and snatched it away, throwing it to the ground. However, the bottle was very sturdy. It didn't break, and the liquid inside didn't spill at all. However, the Ling had the bottle at it, but the bottle. However, the bottle was at. A strange aura rose from Dragon Granny's body as her eyes suffused a red glow as she stared at Feng Chuyen. She wanted to kill Feng Chuyen first before forcefully injecting the liquid into Qin Ling's body. Qin Ling wanted to stand in front of Feng Chuyen, but she was held back by him. Feng Chuyen slowly got up and stared at the Dragon Granny. He said, I'm sorry to have made you wait for so long. However, there are some things that I have to do before I can come. Otherwise, it would be useless even if I came. As he spoke, a companion beast appeared from Feng Chuyen's body. It was a male companion beast with the upper body of a human and the lower body of a snake. He wore a robe that resembled a priest. Mythical companion beast. You went to the Wind God Cave? Qin Ling asked in surprise when she saw Feng Chuyen's companion beast. Yes, there are some things that require sufficient strength to do. Therefore, I went to the Wind God Cave and contracted the companion beasts inside before coming to pick you up, Feng Chuyen said. Qin Ling was delighted. She naturally knew what the Wind God Cave was. It was a dimensional zone that only people with the Feng family's bloodline could enter. There was a special companion beast there. Although it wasn't a companion egg, as long as it had the Feng family's bloodline, it could be taken in as one's companion beast, like incubating a companion egg. However, the companion beast needed too much essence energy. Many generations of the Feng family, including many powerful epic experts, wanted to subdue it, but they failed in the end. Although they didn't die, their cultivation levels were crippled. Feng Chuyen had actually gone to the Wind God Cave for her. It made Qin Ling's previously disheartened heart feel like a withered tree that had been revived. The strange companion beast transformed into a gust of wind and attached itself to Feng Chuyen's body as though it had vanished. However, Feng Chuyen's aura rapidly rose. Dragon Granny looked at Feng Chuyen in surprise. Although she couldn't recognize the origins of the companion beast, she knew that it was no trifling matter from Feng Chuyen's aura. If you don't want her to die, it's best you stand there and don't do anything, Dragon Granny said as she raised the rattle drum in her hand. Clearly, she wanted to use Mia to threaten Feng Chuyen. If I were you, I wouldn't move. That's because as long as you shake that rattle drum, I'll behead you, Feng Chuyen said calmly. Interesting. A mere human actually dares to threaten me with a companion beast. I want to see how you will behead me. As Dragon Granny spoke, she was about to shake the rattle drum in her hand. However, just as she moved her hand, Feng Chuyen's figure vanished like the wind. When he appeared again, he was already behind Dragon Granny. Crack! The rattle drum in Dragon Granny's hand broke, and half of it fell to the ground. Dragon Granny was alarmed. She didn't see how Feng Chuyen had moved. She wanted to turn her head to take a look, but her head moved, but her body didn't. The head landed on the ground before her body collapsed. One of the 7 dragon monarchs, Dragon Granny, had died just like that. Feng Qiuyan also spat out a mouthful of blood. The mysterious companion beast automatically separated from his body and turned back into a tattoo. The incantation patterns on Mia's neck vanished as her body gradually recovered its strength. She looked at Dragon Granny's corpse on the ground in disbelief. What companion beast is that? It doesn't look like a dragon? Mia asked Feng Qiuyan. Feng Qiuyan shook his head and said, I don't know his name. I only know that his surname is Feng. He only follows people from the Feng family, but my strength is too weak. I can't even withstand the tremors produced when using his strength. Suddenly, the waves churned and the water churned. The 7 Seas Dragon King charged into the Sea God Reef dimensional zone. It sensed Dragon Granny's death. Chapter 975. No good, it's the 7 Seas Dragon King. I'll hold it back. You guys return to land first. Mia had only had a restriction placed on her previously, but she wasn't injured. Although Feng Qiuyan had obtained the mysterious mythical companion beast, his body couldn't take it if it attached itself to him in its soul form because the mythical companion beast was too powerful. His body had already been injured after using it for a short period of time. It was obvious how powerful the companion beast was. Mia rushed out of the cabin and immediately saw the 7 Seas Dragon King's true body. Due to Dragon Granny's death, he was already enraged. He couldn't care less about hiding. When he saw Mia come out, the 7 strange dragon-like tentacles swept over. Mia transformed into the Golden Dragon King's body and charged forward to fight the 7 Seas Dragon King. The strength of her body wasn't inferior to the 7 Seas Dragon King's. It was even stronger than the 7 Seas Dragon King's body. Beams of golden light shone resplendently as the seawater churned and huge waves appeared on the surface of the sea. Prime Minister Turtle also rushed forward with his spear and helped Mia attack the 7 Seas Dragon King. However, Prime Minister Turtle wasn't as fast as Mia. He was accidentally hit by the white liquid spewed out by the strange dragon's mouth. Immediately, he was stuck as though he had been drenched in super glue. At first, he could still move, but soon, he couldn't even move. He was sent flying by the strange dragon-like tentacles and smashed into the sand at the bottom of the sea. Qin Ling supported the injured Feng Qiuyan as she swam towards the beach. Her body suffused a golden glow as delicate scales appeared on her skin. Her hair and pupils turned pale gold. Although she was still in human form, she didn't look like a human. However, she wasn't ugly. She just looked a little strange. After transforming, Qin Ling's speed in the water became extremely fast as she quickly swam towards the coast with Feng Qiuyan. Mia constantly fought the 7 Seas Dragon King. Her terrifying Golden Dragon King body didn't seem to be at a disadvantage. She was truly powerful. However, she had yet to advance to the Terror grade. The 7 Seas Dragon King once again used the posture of a Buddha chanting scriptures and entered his terror form. Mia immediately felt herself sink into a thick fog. She heard the chanting coming from all directions, unable to tell where the 7 Seas Dragon King was in the fog. Suddenly, a strange dragon-like tentacle emerged from the fog and spat out white liquid at Mia. Mia reacted extremely quickly as she twisted her dragon body to dodge. However, another tentacle constantly drilled out of the fog. Before Mia could react, white liquid sprayed over her body. Soon, Mia felt the spot where the white liquid had been sprayed stiffen. The dragon claws were stuck to her body, making it abnormally difficult for her to swing them. More and more white liquid sprayed onto the Golden Dragon King body. Mia was like a bound beast. No matter how strong she was, it was useless as the 7 Seas Dragon King's tentacles bit down on her golden dragon body. The 7 strange dragons bit at Mia's body, but she was unable to resist. Soon, she was covered in wounds. The 7 Seas Dragon King clearly hated Mia to the core and didn't devour her directly. Leave first. I want to return to save my sister. When Qin Ling saw the golden dragon king that Mia had transformed into being ravaged by the Seven Seas Dragon King, she gritted her teeth and rushed back. Feng Qiuyan grabbed her and forcefully pulled her ashore. It's useless for you to return. Let's go ashore first. I know it's useless, but if I don't return, I won't be able to feel at ease for the rest of my life. Qin Ling wanted to shake off Feng Qiuyan. I'm sorry, Sis Ling. Feng Qiuyan carried Qin Ling and ignored her resistance as he rushed to the shore. At that moment, the coast was filled with surging seawater. The beach could no longer be seen. Even the trees outside were covered in seawater. Wait at a place without water. You're not allowed to come down. Feng Qiuyan put Qin Ling down before turning around and pouncing into the sea. Qin Ling stared blankly at Feng Qiuyan's figure as he rushed into the sea. She suddenly realized that this wasn't the Feng Qiuyan she knew in the past. The little tail that followed behind her all day, the friendly big boy who called her sister Ling, these clear impressions suddenly became blurry. What replaced them was the feeling of a man, not a boy. He has really grown up. Qin Ling had a complicated expression. After some thought, she jumped onto a lighthouse beside her and waited for Feng Qiuyan in the sea. After Feng Qiuyan entered the sea, he quickly rushed back to where the Seven Seas Dragon King and Mia were fighting. The Golden Dragon King that Mia had transformed into was already severely injured. Feng Qiuyan knew that he only had one chance. His body was already injured, so it was impossible for him to withstand the mysterious companion beast's possession for long. He had to resolve the problem in one strike. The Seven Seas Dragon King seemed to want to tear Mia apart. It believed that Mia had killed Dragon Granny, so the hatred in its heart was unbearable. This is a good opportunity. Feng Qiuyan summoned the mysterious companion beast and allowed it to attach itself to him as a soul. After succeeding, Feng Qiuyan didn't hesitate to draw his saber and slash. It was the power of the wind. In an instant, it sliced through the seawater and slashed at the Seven Seas Dragon King's body. However, when the blade struck the Seven Seas Dragon King's body, it was like a blunt knife cutting through cow tendons. The saber with the power of a mythical companion beast only managed to slice in less than 10 centimeters. A wound that was 10 centimeters deep was enough to be fatal to a human. However, to the massive Seven Seas Dragon King, it was nothing. Bam! With a flick of the strange dragon-like tentacle, Feng Qiuyan's body was sent flying. He shot out of the sea like a cannonball with splashes. As though he had had enough of the game of cat and mouse, the Seven Seas Dragon King opened its true mouth to keep Mia alive. Only then could he resolve the hatred in his heart. Mia was stuck to the white liquid and had no ability to resist. Knowing that it was impossible for her to survive, she transformed into a human-like form and was swallowed by the Seven Seas Dragon King to prevent herself from being bitten and suffering so much pain. Feng. When Qin Ling saw Feng Qiuyan being thrown out of the water, her expression changed drastically. She hurriedly rushed over and hugged him. Seeing that although Feng Qiuyan was seriously injured, he wasn't dead, Qin Ling felt a little more at ease. She glanced at the sea and gritted her teeth before rushing out of Sea God Reef with Feng Qiuyan in her arms. Although she really wanted to rush back and fight with Mia, she definitely couldn't allow Feng Qiuyan to die in front of her. Just as they rushed back to the shore, they saw a man in black armor standing on the shore like a noble, blocking their path. Qin Ling, you don't belong to that world yet. Return with me. In the future, you will become the new human ancestor, the black-armored man said slowly. Chapter 976. Zhou kept trying to leave the Seven Seas Dragon King's stomach, but it was filled with white liquid. Even teleportation couldn't be used in the white liquid, so it wasn't easy to leave. With the Chaos Egg's protection, Zhou Wen's life wasn't in danger. He could slowly try various means, hoping to restrain the Seven Seas Dragon King. First was the power of fire. This power was clearly useless against the white liquid, or perhaps Zhou Wen's fire power level wasn't high, so it wasn't effective. Companion beasts with powerful bodies were useless. They would be stuck to the white liquid the moment they touched it, preventing them from unleashing their combat strength. It was the same for weapon-type companion beasts. No matter how sharp a companion beast was, it would be stuck to the white liquid. It was useless. Zhou Wen basically tried all the various companion beasts and abilities he had, but it was useless. Could it be that this white liquid is really that invincible? Is there no power that can restrain it? Zhou Wen didn't believe such a thing. What other powers are there that I haven't used? After some thought, Zhou Wen suddenly thought of something. It was the terror item he had previously put away. Those terror items were extremely cold. If he could freeze the liquid into a solid, it might lose its stickiness. Zhou Wen tried taking out the bone and placing it into the white liquid. It was unknown if only the power of the terror grade could restrain the terror grade, or if it was because the power of frost was the nemesis of the white liquid. After the extremely cold bone was inserted into the white liquid, the nearby white liquid quickly froze. It's actually possible? Zhou Wen reached out to touch it and realized that the solidified white liquid was indeed no longer sticky. Furthermore, it no longer had any corrosive effect. So the Seven Seas Dragon King can also be restrained by the Ice Dragon's power. In that case, the person who killed the Ice Dragon back then might not be the Seven Seas Dragon King. It might very well be the human with a guardian, Zhou Wen guessed. Otherwise, it was difficult to explain why the Seven Seas Dragon King's power could still kill the Ice Dragon despite being restrained by the Ice Dragon's bone. Was Mia's father also killed by that man? Zhou Wen thought of Mia's father again. Her father had actually left behind a companion egg, so the possibility of him being killed by a human was very high. With a way to restrain the white liquid, Zhou Wen solidified the surrounding white liquid, but he quickly discovered another problem. The solidified white liquid was very tough and almost indestructible. He spent a lot of effort to break a small piece of the white solid. That's a little troublesome. If it's not frozen, it'll be too sticky. If it's frozen, it'll be too hard. Zhou Wen attempted to use the Ice Dragon bone to strike it. It was much easier than using a mythical weapon, but it wasn't fast. Zhou Wen had no other choice but to shatter the white liquid as he froze it. Thankfully, he had Tyrant Behemoth's help. Otherwise, Zhou Wen's progress would have been even more tragic. The main reason was that Zhou Wen's body wasn't resistant to the cold. He couldn't come into contact with the Ice Dragon bone for long periods of time. Even Tyrant Behemoth had to use absolute strength to hold the Ice Dragon tooth for a long period of time without being injured. As he dug, he suddenly sensed the Seven Seas Dragon King's rage. Then, he saw it fighting Mia and Feng Chuyan. Although Zhou Wen wanted to help, he really couldn't leave for the time being. Mia, who was covered in wounds, was swallowed and fell into the white liquid. She originally believed that she was doomed. Not only was the white liquid extremely sticky, but it also had a terrifying corrosive ability. Even with her golden dragon body, it was difficult for her to withstand it for long, much less when she was heavily injured. Just as Mia had given up hope of survival, she suddenly felt something grab her hand and pull her forcefully. At the same time, she felt a terrifying chill coming from her body. The white liquid that was originally stuck to her body slowly became less sticky due to the cold. Soon, Mia was pulled over by the hand. When Mia came out of the white liquid, she almost couldn't believe her eyes. "Zhou Wen, you're actually still alive?" Mia looked at Zhou Wen in surprise and delight, almost believing that she was dreaming. After being devoured by the Seven Seas Dragon King for so long, Zhou Wen was still alive. Furthermore, he didn't seem to be injured. "Is it strange that I'm alive?" Zhou Wen said with a smile. "No, I just didn't expect you to survive in the Seven Seas Dragon King's stomach." Mia looked around and realized that the white liquid had turned solid. It was no longer harmful. "It's all thanks to these things that I can survive in its stomach," Zhouwen said as he pointed at the ice dragon tooth in Tyrant Behemoth's hand. This thing can actually restrain the Seven Seas Dragon King's sticky liquid? Then how did the Seven Seas Dragon King kill the Ice Dragon King? Mia found it unbelievable when she saw this. I suspect that the Ice Dragon King wasn't killed by the Seven Seas Dragon King, but by a human, Zhouwen said. A human? That's even more impossible. How can a human kill the Ice Dragon King? It's a terror-grade existence. Mia was even more incredulous. Ordinary humans can't do it, but humans with guardians might not. Did the Seven Dragons Sea have guardian cocoons in the past? Zhouwen asked after some thought. I don't think so. I've never heard of a guardian cocoon here. Typical guardian cocoons are purely in a dimensional zone of a certain race. The dimensional creatures in the Seven Dragons Sea are too mixed, so it's not suitable to release guardians, Mia said after some thought. That makes sense. Zhouwen told Mia what he had heard. Mia's face was filled with disbelief when she heard that. You mean that the Seven Seas Dragon King is only a puppet? The person who really controls the Seven Dragons Sea is a human? From the looks of it, that's indeed the case. Zhouwen nodded. If he wants to extract Qin Ling's bloodline, wouldn't Qin Ling be in danger? No, I have to think of a way to save her. Mia looked at the white liquid around her, but she didn't know how to do it. Don't worry. The other party needs to wait for the human dragon bloodline in Qin Ling's body to completely take form before attacking her. It will take at least half a month. We still have time. As Zhouwen spoke to Mia, he listened to the commotion outside. After the Seven Seas Dragon King devoured Mia, he left Sea God Reef and swam towards the underwater abyss. Zhouwen's heart stirred as he made Tyrant Behemoth stop. Since he was safe now, he might as well follow the Seven Seas Dragon King into the Abyssal Palace. Perhaps he could find out more secrets. Chapter 977. What's wrong? Mia asked Zhouwen in puzzlement when she saw Tyrant Behemoth put down the ice dragon tooth and stop digging. The Seven Seas Dragon King has gone to meet that person. Even if we can leave now, we will die. Let's wait. Zhouwen didn't have a good solution. Even if he didn't want to eavesdrop, now wasn't the time to go out. Sitting down on the crystal, Zhouwen took out his phone to continue gaming and grinding dungeons. He didn't know how long he would stay here, so he had nothing to do. Mia knew that Zhouwen was right. Even if they left, they couldn't even defeat the Seven Seas Dragon King, much less an even more terrifying human. Qin Ling has been captured by them, right? Although Mia had already guessed the answer, she still hoped that Zhouwen could give her a different answer. He must have been captured. Although Zhouwen didn't see the man capture Feng Qiuyan and Qin Ling, he knew that it was impossible for the man to let Qin Ling leave. Mia was vexed, but there was nothing she could do. Even if she wanted to go out and risk her life, she couldn't do it. When can we leave? Mia asked, but she was suddenly stunned. She realized that she seemed to be too reliant on the human in front of her. In the past, she wouldn't even look at humans, much less ask such a stupid question. Zhouwen looked up at Mia and said, "Don't worry. I'll save them." Although it was a very simple sentence, Mia felt much better after hearing it. It was as though Zhouwen could really do it. The Seven Seas Dragon King returned to the underwater abyss, but to Zhouwen's dismay, it didn't head for the underwater palace where the human was. Instead, it entered a cave to rest. Zhouwen could only wait patiently. With a fighter like the Seven Seas Dragon King available, it was impossible for the human to let the Seven Seas Dragon King sleep in the cave. Zhouwen knew that it was useless to be anxious. He grinded dungeons as usual and also farmed some mortal companion eggs to feed to the evil Spirit King, hoping that it could evolve as soon as possible. He came to the ancient sword tomb dungeon again. Zhouwen had been grinding here recently, hoping to gain some inspiration. Perhaps there was a chance to evolve Sword Pill. Furthermore, when grinding the ancient sword tomb dungeon recently, Zhouwen had been the one to draw the sword and kill it. He didn't get Tyrant Behemoth to take action, otherwise it would be difficult for him to gain any insights. One ancient sword after another was pulled out and killed by the blood-colored avatar. Quite a number of crystals dropped, but they didn't trigger anything. Could it be that the advancement of the sword pill has nothing to do with the sword? Zhou thought to himself, but there was nothing he could do. This was the only solution he could think of. Zhou came in front of a sword grave again and pulled out a short sword. The dagger was crimson in color and looked like it was forged from copper. It was exquisite and elegant. The hilt was in the shape of a phoenix head, and the guard was a pair of wings. Furthermore, the dagger even had a scabbard. The moment the short sword was pulled out, terrifying flames erupted from the scabbard. It was so hot that Zhou immediately let go and hurriedly summoned the Galaxy Shell Dragon armor to wear. The short sword attacked Zhou again with flames that filled the sky. It was clearly a mythical fire elemental ancient sword, and the power of the flames was rather powerful. However, the defense of the Shell Dragon armor surprised Zhou. Without activating absolute defense, it was able to block the ancient sword's attack. However, the flaming sword aura on the ancient sword burned the armor. When Zhou activated absolute defense, he realized that he couldn't even feel the heat from the flaming sword aura. Zhou stood there and allowed the ancient sword to constantly slash at him. At most, it would knock him back a few steps, unable to injure him at all. What a powerful defense! Zhou was overjoyed. Such armor's defense was definitely a life-preservation weapon. It was much stronger than the dragon's scale armor. The strength of absolute defense was likely comparable to Tyrant Behemoth's absolute strength. However, one was offensive while the other was defensive. Thankfully, I killed the Galaxy Shell Dragon with a sneak attack. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been easy to kill it in a head-on battle. Zhou was secretly delighted. The duration of absolute defense was shorter than absolute strength, but it was already very strong. Even a top mythical power would find it difficult to injure Zhou during the duration of absolute defense. Absolute strength. Absolute defense. Could there be absolute speed or something? If I can gather an absolute set, that would be really impressive, Zhou thought greedily. After testing the strength of the Shell Dragon armor, Zhou wasn't in the mood to waste time with the ancient sword. He summoned the light concealment sword to fight. Zhou's sword techniques were already pretty good, but he couldn't gain an advantage over the short sword. As he fought, Zhou suddenly realized that there was no need for him to work so hard. He didn't need to do anything himself. He was a man with sword pill. Sword pill was similar to a flying sword. It could be used in midair, so there was no need for him to use the sword to slash at others. I wonder if the strength of sword pill can fight a mythical weapon. Zhou summoned sword pill and planned on giving it a try. With a thought, a resplendent diamond-like sword pill appeared in front of Zhou. Then, with Zhou's thought, it stabbed at the short sword. Clang! Clang! Sword pill and the short sword constantly clashed in midair, as Zhou became a spectator. So it's so fun not having to use a sword to slash at others. Could it be that so many people like flying swords? It's indeed a necessary technique for lazy people. Zhou was somewhat delighted. It wasn't because he had found a way to slack off, but because of the strength of sword pill. It could actually clash head-on with a mythical sword without being damaged. It's really good stuff. Zhou used the 3000 sword intent. Sword pill had the concept of 3000 sword intent. Now that Zhou used the 13 sword techniques, the might and concept were much stronger than when he used a sword to slash at others. Furthermore, sword pill didn't have any restrictions. The moves he could use were far more than when Zhou used them himself. They were also more carefree. If I can really raise sword pill to the mythical stage in the future, will I be like the ancient legendary sword immortals, able to behead someone from thousands of kilometers away? The more Zhou used sword pill, the more comfortable he felt with it. He decided to use the short sword as a sparring partner and used all 3,000 sword intent. Zhou didn't notice that when he used sword pill to fight the short sword, some ancient swords in the ancient sword tomb would tremble slightly every time he switched to a different sword intent. It was as though they were responding to the sword intent on sword pill. Chapter 978. The characteristics of sword pill were very strange. Typical weapons or mobile life souls needed to be in contact with each other before they could inject essence energy into the weapon. Even if one could transmit essence energy across space, there would be a transmission path that resembled a link. However, sword pill was completely different. There seemed to be some kind of spatial teleportation ability between it and Zhou. Even if they were far apart, Zhou's essence energy could be instantly transmitted into sword pill's body without any expenditure. There were no traces of transmission. Be it control or essence energy transmission, there was no delay. This was very rare. At the very least, Zhou had never seen such an ability on other weapons. Using the characteristics of sword pill, Zhou could attack from afar without any qualms. It was almost the same as him attacking with a sword in hand. Zhou controlled sword pill to constantly fight the ancient sword, and his control over sword pill became stronger. Unfortunately, sword pill was only an epic life soul after all. It was still difficult to defeat a mythical ancient sword. During the battle, Zhou discovered some strange phenomena. When Zhou controlled sword pill to use a specific sword intent, some swords in the ancient sword tomb would react to the sword intent. Different ancient swords would react to different sword intent. If it reacts to the sword intent, it means that the ancient sword has a similar concept, which is why it resonates. Does that mean that I can use the sword intent on the sword pill to determine which type of ancient sword they belong to? However, it doesn't seem useful to determine the type. It would be great if I could directly determine which sword is at the mythical stage. As Zhou fought, he observed the ancient swords that had a reaction. After a while, Zhou suddenly realized that he might really be able to determine the level of an ancient sword through the sword intent resonance. As low-level ancient swords had very weak sword intents, they didn't even have any sword intent. Therefore, it was relatively difficult to trigger their resonance. As for a stronger ancient sword, it was easier to trigger a resonance due to its stronger sword intent. Such ancient swords were mainly at the epic stage. For higher levels, like those mythical ancient swords, due to their extremely strong sword intents, Zhou's sword intent had to be of a sufficiently high level to trigger their resonance. Therefore, it was relatively difficult. Therefore, Zhou came to a conclusion. Ancient swords that easily resonated were typically at the epic stage. A small number were at the legendary stage. As for the ancient swords that didn't resonate easily, they were either the strongest mythical ones, the weakest legendary ones, or even mortal ones. In any case, they were either the best or the worst. Although he couldn't accurately distinguish them, being able to eliminate a large number of options was a huge improvement for Zhou. In the constant battle with the ancient sword, Zhou had a whim. Since sword pill has already fused with 3,000 sword intents and can resonate with different types of ancient swords, it means that it has all sorts of different characteristics. Therefore, it's clearly wrong for me to want to turn it into a certain type of sword. But there's no sword in the world that can accommodate all the characteristics. Then, can I make sword pill become a sword suitable for different sword intents when using different sword intents? Zhou didn't know if sword pill had such a transformation ability, but he decided to give it a try. Zhou didn't know what kind of sword should be matched with what kind of sword intent, but with the ancient sword tomb, this wasn't a problem. All he needed to do was use a sword intent and pull out the ancient sword that resonated with the sword intent. Then, he could understand all the characteristics of the ancient sword through combat. However, before that, Zhou had to defeat the ancient sword with fire elemental powers in front of him. The ancient sword was very difficult to deal with. It was clearly difficult for Zhou to defeat it with his sword skills and strength. Zhou didn't wish to waste any more time, so he summoned Tyrant Behemoth. With Tyrant Behemoth's help, he quickly snapped the short sword. Killed mythical creature, bronze sparrow sword. Discovered companion egg. Zhou couldn't help but be delighted. He didn't have many fire elemental companion eggs, and weapons were even rarer. This mythical ancient sword was rather good and could be used. After hatching the bronze sparrow sword, with a thought, a red copper short sword with a scabbard appeared in Zhou hand. The bronze sparrow sword had similar stats as the light concealment sword, but its life providence and life soul had fire elemental properties. Therefore, its attacks had fire elemental properties. This was something the light concealment sword didn't have. The bronze sparrow sword's wheel of destiny was unexpected. It wasn't an offensive wheel of destiny, but the ability to be reborn from flames. Even if the bronze sparrow sword was destroyed, as long as its scabbard was still there, it could use the flames in the scabbard to repair itself. So the bronze sparrow sword has such an ability. Thankfully, Tyrant Behemoth destroyed the sword and scabbard together. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been easy to kill it. Zhou still liked the bronze sparrow sword. However, after using it for a while, he realized that the sword was useless to him. Such a strong fire elemental attribute wasn't suitable for sneak attack. It could be used as a normal sword. To be honest, Zhou wasn't good at fire elemental sword technique. He might as well use sword pill. However, the advantages of the bronze sparrow sword were very obvious. It was very effective in restraining cold elemental attack. Furthermore, its characteristic of being reborn from flames would be very useful at certain times. Zhou had no choice but to put away the bronze sparrow sword. He would take it out when he needed it in the future, or if there was a suitable opportunity in the future, it wouldn't be a bad idea to use it for fusion. After settling the bronze sparrow sword, Zhou began his plan of matching sword intent with the sword. He first used sword pill to resonate with the ancient sword before pulling out the resonating ancient sword. Then, he used battle intent to fully understand the sword's characteristic. Although sword pill didn't change in the beginning, Zhou realized that the matching sword intent had become stronger during the battle. It was really boring in the Seven Seas Dragon King's stomach. Apart from grinding dungeons, Zhou had nothing else to do. Thankfully, he had brought a lot of food in the chaos space, so he didn't have to be afraid of hunger. Zhou took out quite a lot of food and drinks and gave a portion of them to Mia. In order to rest better, Zhou even took out a soft mattress and other things. He even gave Mia a player that stored quite a number of movies and music so that she could pass the time. Mia saw that Zhou was like a magical pocket that constantly took out all sorts of strange and novel things, making Mia increasingly feel that Zhou was different. For the next few days, the Seven Seas Dragon King slept in the cave and didn't see the human man again. It was useless for Zhou to worry. All he could do was get Tyrant Behemoth to open up the passageway as he constantly grinded dungeons to practice his swordplay, hoping to raise sword pill to a perfect body. Chapter 979. Constant practice every day brought about very good result. Although sword pill didn't advance, Zhou sword techniques really improved by leaps and bounds. Although it wasn't as ferocious as his movement techniques, he could already be considered to have gained some basic mastery of the sword Dao. It wasn't like the past where he only used a sword as a saber to slash at passers-by. After practicing more, he found it fun. Although they were all swords, the usage and concept of different swords were different. Some very subtle things couldn't be understood just by looking at them. He had to experience them personally, as he had truly put in hard work, be it his sword intent or the 13 sword techniques, they were improving by leaps and bounds. Zhou felt that the 13 sword techniques were very likely the second divine skill he had mastered. 7 days had passed, but the Seven Seas Dragon King remained motionless. It slept in the cave, which was a little different from what Zhou had imagined. Although Tyrant Behemoth had already pierced through the white liquid and discovered that they were in something similar to a stomach, it was useless if they couldn't save Qin Ling and company even if they could escape. Therefore, Zhou kept comforting Mia and getting her to continue waiting patiently. However, Zhou felt that it wasn't possible to just wait. Since the white liquid had been pierced through, Zhou decided to release Primordial Spore to see if it could parasitize the Seven Seas Dragon King from the inside. In theory, it seemed impossible for a mythical Primordial Spore to parasitize a Terror-grade Seven Seas Dragon King. However, Zhou felt that it wasn't completely impossible for Primordial Spore. After all, it was currently in the Seven Seas Dragon King's body. This was a huge advantage. Furthermore, the Seven Seas Dragon King was in a deep slumber. All aspects of his body were at their lowest state, so perhaps Primordial Spore had a chance. The tiny Primordial Spore flew out of the Seven Seas Dragon King's stomach and quickly landed on the inner wall of a particular organ like a speck of dust. The Seven Seas Dragon King's organs were still heaving evenly without any abnormalities. Only then did Zhou heave a sigh of relief. Although he didn't know if the parasitism would succeed, from the looks of it, Primordial Spore hadn't been discovered. Zhou continued waiting. If Primordial Spore could successfully parasitize him, it would undoubtedly be great news for him. What followed was another long wait. Zhou spent every day grinding dungeons to train. His sword intent constantly became stronger, and his sword techniques seemed to be aided by God. In Zhou mind, he remembered the characteristics and usage of different swords. Furthermore, he vaguely sensed that sword pill was showing signs of advancing. 3,000 sword intents needed to be matched with 3,000 swords. Most of the sword intents could be found in the ancient sword tomb. However, there were quite a few sword intents that did not resonate in the ancient sword tomb. Zhou didn't know if it was because his sword intent wasn't strong enough to trigger those high-level swords, or if there were no ancient swords with similar sword intent in the ancient sword tomb. Zhou thought for a moment and felt that the former was more likely. Therefore, he planned on raising his sword intent level. Although the sword intent originated from the sword art, it could only be comprehended and not practiced. If one could comprehend it, perhaps it would only take a moment to improve. However, if one did not comprehend it in their heart, even if they practiced for 10 years, they might not be able to improve at all. It's definitely impossible to train hard, but if I don't train, I won't be able to understand the true intent in the sword. Naturally, I won't be able to comprehend the sword intent. What should I do? Zhou thought for a moment and thought of a solution that wasn't really a solution. He first used the 3,000 sword intents to resonate with the ancient swords before pulling out the ancient swords that hadn't resonated. Although he might encounter low-level swords, he might also encounter mythical swords. If that happened, he would narrow the range of finding mythical swords. In the process of fighting high-level swords, he could comprehend his own sword intent. He drew his sword, fought, drew his sword, and fought again. Zhou kept repeating this process. "What's that thing you play all day?" Mia had been observing Zhou for many days. Although she wasn't interested in human games, this place was just too boring, so she couldn't help but ask when she saw that Zhou was gaming on his phone. "Well, it's a phone game. I can kill monsters to obtain experience and equipment," Zhou explained. Upon hearing Zhou's words, Mia's expression turned odd. She didn't think of herself as a monster in the past, nor could she understand why Qin Ling was so vexed because she had the Golden Dragon bloodline. However, after hearing Zhou's unintentional words today, Mia suddenly understood why Qin Ling cared about the dragon bloodline. This was because she felt somewhat uncomfortable. "Do you want to play?" Zhou asked Mia. "No need." Mia shook her head and sat back on her cushion to watch a television series. However, she couldn't immerse herself in it. She was somewhat dazed. Zhou didn't know what Mia was thinking. He was still constantly practicing his swordplay in-game. This was already the 11th day since Zhou Wen and company entered the Seven Seas Dragon King. The Seven Seas Dragon King was still asleep, but Zhou Wen received a signal that delighted him. Primordial spore had successfully parasitized it. Although it was only a preliminary parasitization and it would still take some time to truly control the Seven Seas Dragon King, this was already very good news for Zhou Wen. I hope there's still time. The last time Zhou Wen eavesdropped on the conversation between Dragon Granny and the man, he knew that if Qin Ling drank that thing, she would reach a mature state in half a month. When the time came, the man would extract Qin Ling's bloodline and create something that could turn humans into dragons. Zhou Wen had to save Qin Ling before that happened. He didn't know if becoming a human dragon was good or bad, but humans had the right to choose. Zhou Wen felt that such a forced mutation was a little overboard. At the very least, he didn't want to become a dragon man. Would it be better to become a catman? Zhou Wen thought to himself that if he had to choose to transform, he would rather become a cat. At least it wouldn't be that ugly. Do you know sword arts? Zhou Wen suddenly asked Mia one day. No. Mia shook her head and asked curiously, "Why are you suddenly asking this? If you know sword arts, I want to see your sword intent." After practicing for so many days, Zhou Wen felt that his sword art had reached a bottleneck. If he could improve further, his sword art should be able to break through to the mythical stage. However, this bottleneck clearly wasn't that easy to break through. Furthermore, time was indeed too short. It hadn't been many days since he began practicing seriously. The concepts in the world are interconnected. Although I don't know sword arts, I can show you my concept if you want to see it, Mia said. Chapter 980. If it's possible, please let me take a look. Zhou Wen felt that he really needed to change his train of thought. Otherwise, he would only walk into a dead end if he continued. Mia thought for a moment and said, "I'm a golden dragon. All my powers are obtained from the inheritance. I only know one concept, Golden Dragon King battle intent." Battle intent? How is it different from ordinary concepts? Zhou Wen asked. I can't tell. Feel it yourself, Mia said as she pressed a hand on Zhou Wen's forehead. Zhou Wen didn't dodge and allowed Mia's palm to press on his forehead. As he didn't dare cause too much of a stir in the Seven Seas Dragon King's body, Mia directly imprinted her Golden Dragon King battle intent into Zhou Wen's mind, allowing him to directly sense her battle intent. At that instant, Zhou Wen seemed to see an extremely terrifying Golden Dragon King appear in the world. It was ferocious and domineering, as though it was the overlord of the entire world. The terrifying battle intent made everything tremble. That was the primordial era. Lightning, earthly fire, great desolate water, and all kinds of disasters frequently descended. All kinds of creatures died in those disasters. Only those creatures with incomparably strong vitality that could resist the disasters could survive in that primordial era. The Golden Dragon King grew up in such an environment. At the same time, due to the death of all things, food became extremely scarce. All sorts of terrifying creatures could only fight each other and eat each other's flesh and blood. Battle. A crazy battle. Only by fighting could one survive. The Golden Dragon King might not be the strongest ferocious beast, nor was it the strongest with the strongest defense, much less the fastest. However, in the constant battles, the Golden Dragon King rapidly grew. It constantly transformed and evolved in battle, finally standing at the top of the food chain. The unyielding, fearless, brave, crazy, and intelligent will left even Zhou Wen, who was a spectator, deeply shocked. Zhou Wen knew that this was the Golden Dragon's heritage memories. The Golden Dragon King in the battle intent was actually the first Golden Dragon King. Probably no longer existed in the world. However, its fearless will to fight had been left behind forever. There's no such thing as good fortune after surviving a calamity in this world. It's basically obtaining enough insights and growth in a calamity that allows one to become better. Zhou came to a realization as he seemed to understand why his sword art had been unable to make a breakthrough. It wasn't because his training wasn't good enough, nor was it because his comprehension wasn't good enough, nor was it because he wasn't diligent enough. It was because no matter how much Zhou trained, he was ultimately learning from others and the 3,000 sword intents. He didn't comprehend anything that belonged to him in battle. This was also related to Zhou views. He had no intention of practicing sword arts. He only learned sword arts to advance sword pill, so he naturally learned it without any intention of improving it further. Only now did Zhou realize that he had underestimated sword technique. Everything in the world had its own logic. If he didn't put in the effort, no matter how smart he was, it would be difficult for him to reach the paramount realm. Only then did Zhou realize that he hadn't lost to sword techniques, but to himself. Indeed, I need to put my heart into everything I do. Zhou couldn't help but work hard. I hope my battle intent can help you, Mia said as she retracted her hand when she saw that Zhou had escaped the influence of her battle intent. Thank you so much. You're so useful. You've helped me greatly. Zhou thanked her sincerely. If Mia hadn't shown him the Golden Dragon King's battle intent, he wouldn't have thought of his own problems. It was very easy for humans to discover other people's problems, but it was the hardest to discover one's own problems. After figuring all of this out, Zhou's mind cleared up. When he thought about the 3,000 sword intents again, he immediately felt different. It was as though he was looking at the 3,000 sword intents from another angle. He discovered many things he hadn't noticed before. Mia looked at Zhou and suddenly realized that his aura seemed to have changed. It was ethereal and illusory, as though it was unreal. Although Zhou was standing in front of her, she felt that he was like a virtual image. He didn't have a physical existence. Furthermore, Zhou's presence continued to decrease. If she closed her eyes, she wouldn't even be able to sense Zhou standing in front of her. What did you do? Mia looked at Zhou in a daze, not daring to move her eyes away from his figure. It was as though Zhou would vanish the moment she saw him. Nothing. I just gained some insights after seeing your Golden Dragon King's battle intent, Zhou said. Mia's expression turned even odder. She really didn't understand what Zhou's performance had to do with the Golden Dragon King's battle intent. If Zhou's battle intent was surging like the reincarnation of a Tyrannosaurus, Mia believed that it was something he had comprehended from the Golden Dragon King's battle intent. But now, Zhou's presence was getting weaker and weaker. This completely contradicted the Golden Dragon King's battle intent. Mia couldn't understand how Zhou had connected the two and comprehended such a thing. Are humans all so strange? Mia was puzzled. Zhou didn't explain further because some things couldn't be explained with words. After sitting down, he took out his phone and entered the game again. When he arrived at the ancient sword tomb again, Zhou wasn't in a hurry to use his sword. He walked to a sword tomb in front of him and reached out to pull out the sword in the tomb. After the ancient sword was pulled out, it immediately struggled out of Zhou's palm and flew into the air, preparing to attack. However, the ancient sword circled a few times in the air, as though it couldn't see Zhou. It didn't attack him. Zhou ignored it and walked to another sword tomb. He pulled out the ancient sword on it. The outcome was the same. The ancient sword streaked across the sky as though it couldn't see Zhou. As Zhou walked, he pulled out his swords. Hundreds of ancient swords of different levels and attributes were pulled out by him, but none of them attacked Zhou. It was as though the person who pulled them out wasn't Zhou. At that moment, Zhou finally moved. With a tap of his finger, a resplendent sword pill tore through the air and streaked across the sky. More than 100 ancient swords were instantly sliced apart by sword pill. None of the swords could withstand a single strike from sword pill. The remnant sword fragments fell to the ground, leaving only sword pill floating in front of Zhou. Above Zhou and sword pill, incomparably terrifying sword intent rose. Hum. In the sword tomb 10,000 swords hummed. Chapter 981. A swordsman is a murderous weapon. If the sword doesn't move, it will be like a Buddha or an immortal. If the sword moves, it will slay Buddha and exterminate immortals. If I don't have such intentions, why would I need to use the sword? If I use my sword, I will be the enemy of the entire world. Zhou stared at the sword pill in front of him and muttered to himself. The sword beam on the sword pill bloomed, and the many ancient swords in the ancient sword tomb buzzed even more intensely. Ancient swords tore out of the ground. Without anyone pulling them out, they flew out by themselves. Countless ancient swords tore out of the grave and attacked Zhou and sword pill like a rain of swords. The formation was truly terrifying, and even the world changed color. However, Zhou didn't show any fear. The baneful aura on the sword pill surged into the sky as it circled around him. Any ancient sword that approached Zhou was instantly sliced apart by the sword pill. The ancient swords attacked like rain and fell like rain. 3 feet away from Zhou were stabbed with broken hilts, but there wasn't a single sword within 3 feet. Only the sword pill swept through the air like a god, shocking all the swords. A dragon-like sword tore through the air. It was a white ancient sword with the aura of a flood dragon on it. It was so brilliant that it couldn't be looked at directly. It transformed into a flood dragon-like sword beam that shot towards Zhou. That sword was clearly a mythical weapon, the Emperor of Swords. However, Zhou didn't seem to take it to heart. He extended his hand and beckoned at the sword pill, saying, "Sword, come." With that said, the sword pill transformed into a stream of light that shot towards Zhou's palm. When it landed in his palm, the sword pill had already transformed into a real sword. The sword was 4 feet long, and the sword's spine was straight and firm. It was like an indomitable gentleman, and there were blood patterns faintly appearing on the sword. The flood dragon sword slashed down from the sky, but Zhou didn't retreat at all. He slashed with his sword in defiance of the heavens. Clang! The flood dragon-like sword beam was slashed apart by the sword in Zhou's hand. It collided with the flood dragon sword's blade and sent it flying. Buzz! Another ancient sword tore out of the ground with a terrifying sword beam. The sword was wide and extremely heavy. When it slashed down, it felt like a mountain was pressing down on him. Its momentum seemed unstoppable. However, Zhou wasn't afraid as he brandished his sword to meet it. However, the sword in his hand changed when he brandished it. It turned into a soft sword made of green silk. The sword was as thin as a wing and as light as a veil. The two swords clashed. The sword in Zhou's hand was like silk as it wrapped around the heavy sword. Using the momentum, he flung the heavy sword away and sent it crashing into a large sword grave. Buzz! Buzz! Terrifying ancient swords broke out of the tomb one after another, bringing with them boundless sword chi as if they were bent on destroying Zhou and the sword in his hand. However, Zhou showed no fear as he brandished his sword to meet the terrifying mythical swords. When Zhou struck out, the sword in his hand transformed into a myriad of forms. When he faced any sword, his sword move, and sword intent would transform into a form that countered his opponent. Even though the other party was at the mythical stage, one level higher than him, Zhou wasn't at a disadvantage in battle. 7 mythical swords joined the battle. Zhou fought alone with his sword and only used sword techniques to fight them. He wasn't at a disadvantage against the 7 swords. When Zhou was in high spirits, the sword pill in his hand transformed into the bamboo blade. He fused with the blade and used immortal slaying to snap one of the mythical swords. However, due to using too much strength and expending too much energy, before Zhou could recover, he was swarmed by the 6 mythical swords and slashed at him. Seeing the game screen turn black, Zhou wasn't vexed at all. Instead, he was overjoyed. Without a doubt, his sword technique had advanced to the mythical stage, and sword pill had advanced to a perfect body. After dripping his blood to revive, he reopened the game and looked at the blood-colored avatar's information. Indeed, sword pill had advanced to a perfect body. Strangely, sword pill's name didn't change this time. It was still sword pill. Among the life souls that changed their names during the first evolution, only sword pill didn't change its name after the second evolution. It was the only one. Zhou looked at his skill column again, and indeed, there was an additional mythical sword technique. Heart-defying sword. Mythical Zhou was very satisfied with this sword technique. Although he knew quite a number of divine skills, the only divine skills he had mastered were Transcendent, Flying, Immortal, and Heart-defying sword. Of course, the level given by the game wasn't important to Zhou. What was important was that he finally knew how to use a sword. Furthermore, it was a very special sword technique. As sword pill advanced to a perfect body, his strength stat reached 41 points. Now, the only stat left was speed. I never expected that I would be the last to reach 41 points for my speed stat despite being best at movement technique. Zhou couldn't help but sigh. There were some things that he couldn't control. If he had a choice, he would definitely raise his speed stat first, but he couldn't do as he wished. Thankfully, he only needed to raise Glimmer to a perfect body to raise his speed stat to 41 points. If everything went smoothly, he could use the Lost Immortal Sutra to advance to the mythical stage. Zhou entered the ancient sword tomb again. This time, he no longer had the utilitarian mindset he had when practicing his swordsmanship. However, with the heart-defying swords Sword Intent and Sword Pill, he had a good way to grind the ancient sword tomb. As long as he stimulated the heart-defying sword's Sword Intent with all his might, he could trigger the 10,000 swords and make the mythical sword take the initiative to attack him. Indeed, when Zhou used the heart-defying Sword Intent, the entire ancient sword tomb boiled again. 10,000 swords hummed in unison as many ancient swords automatically broke out of the tomb in a bid to kill Zhou. Unfortunately, they couldn't pass Sword Pill's test and were all sliced apart. Finally, the mythical sword was unleashed. Unlike before, only 6 mythical swords appeared this time. Furthermore, the mythical swords this time were somewhat different from the 6 mythical swords from before. Zhou estimated that 7 mythical swords would spawn every time the ancient sword tomb respawned, but the kind of mythical sword that spawned wasn't fixed. This time, Zhou had no intention of practicing his swordsmanship. After luring the mythical swords out, he activated his mythical companion Heavenly Pet. The 6 mythical swords were no match for them and were quickly killed. Ding! One of the mythical swords dropped a companion egg. From the looks of it, I'm really lucky. Copper Sparrow dropped not long ago and now, another one. Zhou picked up the companion egg and was overjoyed. It was actually the Knight Immaculate Sword. Among the 3 famous swords, there was the superior grade Light Concealment, the middle grade Shadow Bearing, and the inferior grade Knight Immaculate. Now that Zhou had the superior grade and inferior grade, he lacked the middle grade Shadow Bearing. If I can gather all 3 swords, I wonder if I can fuse the 3 into one? Zhou thought to himself. However, it wasn't easy for Knight Immaculate to drop. He didn't know when Shadow Bearing would drop. After all, the famous swords in the ancient sword tomb respawned randomly. It wasn't possible for Shadow Bearing to drop every time. Chapter 982. Night Drill, Mythical Life Providence, Tangible Sword Life Soul, Tangible Sword Aura Wheel of Destiny, Night Drill Strength, 80 Speed, 80 Constitution, 80 Essence Energy, 81 Talent Skill, Sword Aura Slash, Sword Aura Wheel, Sword Aura Rain, Dao Integration Strike Companion Form. Sword Night Drill's attributes were very similar to Light Concealment, but they were somewhat different. It was also considered a top-notch companion beast, but Night Drill couldn't be invisible. Zhou summoned Night Immaculate Sword and saw that it was condensed from a blob of sword aura. Although he could see it, he could only see a blob of white sword aura. It was like a sword condensed from a thick white fog. After giving it a try, Night Drill's various skills were similar to light concealment. However, one was a sword beam, while the other was a sword aura. After matching light concealment with Night Drill, the compatibility between the two reached 91%. If he wanted to fuse them, the success rate was very high. However, Zhou didn't choose to fuse them. He still wanted to wait for the shadow-bearing sword to see what difference the three swords would have. Zhou grinded for another 2 days, but he didn't see the shadow-bearing sword. However, the Seven Seas Dragon King finally moved. Indeed, the Seven Seas Dragon King arrived at the man's palace. The man wasn't inside. The Seven Seas Dragon King passed through the palace and arrived behind it. Zhou immediately saw the man, Feng Chuyen, and Qin Ling. Feng Chuyen was locked in a crystal coffin, looking like he was asleep. As for Qin Ling, she was in a huge instrument. Part of the instrument was a crystal tank with pure water inside. It was very similar to the water in the Death Water Zone. Qin Ling was inside the pure water. The pale golden scales on her body had already covered her body, and dragon horns grew on her head. She looked like a golden dragon. Zhou didn't know if Qin Ling's state was considered mature, but from the looks of it, the man's experiment was already underway. Zhou sized up the instrument, but he couldn't tell what it was used for. Seven Seas, the time is ripe. Gather all the dimensional creatures in the Seven Seas, the man said to the Seven Seas Dragon King. After the Seven Seas Dragon King heard the order, he raised his 7 strange dragon-like tentacles. The strange dragons opened their mouths and let out a silent roar. Using Truth Listener, Zhou could hear a high-frequency sound wave. This sound wave couldn't be heard by ordinary ears, but all the dimensional creatures in the 7 Dragons Sea Zone were approaching the abyss after hearing it. The sea snakes of the seabed blue hole, the lobsters of the Deathwater Zone, the clam girls of Infinite Island, and all sorts of dimensional creatures were gathering towards the abyss. What does that man want? Zhou felt that something was amiss. Qin Ling, we can begin now. A large number of dimensional creatures arrived outside the palace, but they could only swim in the seawater. They didn't enter the palace protected by a mysterious force. If I do as you say, will you let Feng Chuyen off? Qin Ling asked through gritted teeth. I bearing Bear Falls Dragon King. God King said. I God King said. I King of King. Qin Ling glanced at Feng Chuyen in the crystal coffin and gritted her teeth. She bit her tongue and spat out a mouthful of blood. This mouthful of blood was somewhat different from ordinary blood. It was golden in color. After the golden blood flowed out, it immediately mixed with the pure water. After being diluted by a large amount of pure water, the mouthful of blood quickly disappeared. The man reached out and pressed the start of the instrument. The liquid in the huge jar spewed upwards and fused into the seawater above his head. After the countless dimensional creatures outside came into contact with the liquid in the jar, some low-level dimensional creatures quickly underwent changes. The sea snake actually grew claws, and scales grew on the clam girl's fair skin. All sorts of dimensional creatures seemed to undergo changes. Even the fish dimensional creatures grew claws. Could it be? Zhou suddenly came to a realization. After these dimensional creatures evolved, they had characteristics that were close to dragons. Although they were still far from being comparable to real dragons, their bodies now looked like they could move on land. These dimensional creatures that were originally in the sea might very well break out of the 7 Dragons Sea and enter land. Just the thought of it terrified him. It was impossible for the people of Sea Return City to fend off so many dimensional creatures. Should I go out and stop him now? Zhou felt that even if he went out, he probably couldn't stop the man from doing all of this. If it was 1 Terragrade, he could still think of a way to deal with 1 or 2. It would probably be difficult for Zhou to deal with two Terragrade creatures. Primordial Spore, hurry up. Zhou could only wait for the Primordial Spore's parasitism to succeed. If he could control the Seven Seas Dragon King to fight the man, there was still a chance to salvage the situation. More and more sea creatures came here to receive the baptism of the liquid containing Qin Ling's blood. Their bodies were gradually changing. After Qin Ling spat out the mouthful of golden blood, the man didn't force her to do anything else. However, Qin Ling looked very dispirited. The mouthful of golden blood wasn't as simple as ordinary blood. All the dimensional creatures in the Seven Dragons Sea were mutating. The more time passed, the more intense the changes in their bodies became. Even the dimensional creatures that had completed their evolution didn't leave. They kept circling the abyss. Zhou could sense that the Seven Seas Dragon King's consciousness was gradually turning blurry. Primordial Spore was silently parasitizing its soul. It was already very powerful to be able to parasitize a creature with a terror form in such a short period of time. However, the situation was too urgent. Zhou still felt that it was too slow. In just a few days, a large number of dimensional creatures in the Seven Dragons Sea had mutated. They possessed some of the characteristics of dragons, and had grown to a certain extent. Chi-Hai, it's done. Let them step onto land and turn all the humans in the world into dragon men, the man ordered Chi-Hai. Should I give it a try? Zhou wondered if he should go out and stop him now, but on second thought, he gave up on the idea. If he went out and risked his life, the chances of turning the situation around were very low. The man had been ordering the Seven Seas Dragon King to control the marine dimensional creatures. From the looks of it, he didn't have such an ability. Since the Seven Seas Dragon King is the key to controlling this mutated dimensional creature, as long as the primordial spore can successfully parasitize it, it can completely reverse the situation. Since Feng Qiuyan and Qin Ling weren't in danger for the time being, Zhou decided to wait and see. Zhou told Mia about the situation outside and his judgment. After Mia heard that, she heaved a sigh of relief. Since the man hadn't killed Qin Ling, the other matters weren't that important to her. Although I don't know what method that man used, I'm certain that those mutated creatures aren't going ashore to eat humans. They should be infecting humans with the mutated blood in their bodies, Mia said after some thought. Chapter 983. The people of Sea Return City realized that something was amiss in the past few days. The dimensional zones on land were fine, but they couldn't find any dimensional creatures in the dimensional zones in the sea. All the dimensional creatures in the sea seemed to vanish. Sea God Reef, Undersea Blue Hole, Infinite Island, and other places were empty. There was almost no sign of dimensional creatures. The Hui family contacted all the families in Sea Return City to discuss countermeasures. As for the Feng family, they were also vexed over Feng Qiuyan and Qin Ling's disappearance. They had already sent people to search everywhere, but they couldn't find their whereabouts. The situation in the Seven Dragons Sea is very strange now. All the dimensional creatures have vanished. Everyone, tell me, what does this mean? Old Master Hui swept his gaze across the core members of the various families. The disappearance of the dimensional creatures is a good thing for us. We don't rely on the dimensional zones in the sea to begin with. All we need to do is guard the dimensional zones and mineral deposits ashore, said a family head with the surname Liu. That's true, but I'm afraid that the dimensional creatures in the sea will cause trouble again, said an elder from the Feng family. What can happen? After all, they are dimensional creatures in the sea. Only a small number of them have the ability to fight out of the sea. Most of them will have their combat strength greatly reduced once they get ashore. They won't pose any danger to us. Family head Liu paused before saying, besides, aren't we already prepared? Even if Sea Return City really can't be defended, we can retreat into the dimensional zones on land. Everyone has been operating there for a long time. It shouldn't be a problem, right? Brother Liu is right. After all, those things are from the sea. At most, they will just circle around and leave. It's not like they can grow legs to fight for territory with us. Another family head said. That's right. Everyone immediately began talking. Most people felt that they should stay and continue watching. Even if something really happened, it wouldn't be too late to retreat. I think we should evacuate immediately. A different voice sounded. Everyone looked at the person who spoke and saw that the person who spoke was a young man in his 20s. Most people knew that he was Hui Haifeng from the Hui family. Young Master Feng, what do you mean? Family head Lu asked Hui Haifeng. Hui Haifeng took out a small bottle and held it in his hand so that everyone could see what was inside. The bottle wasn't big, about the size of a mineral water bottle. It was also filled with water, but there was something that looked like a mushroom in the water. It was the same as the test subjects he had shown Zhouwen. However, that thing was supposed to be white, but now it was glowing with a pale gold color. It looked very strange. What is this? Old Master Hui looked at Hui Haifeng and asked. He knew that Hui Haifeng was doing research, and he also supported Hui Haifeng, but he never thought that Hui Haifeng would really be able to research something. Grandpa, this is a sample of the fungi that I extracted from the marine plants and cultivated. Originally, it would take at least a year for these fungi to evolve from spores to what they are now. However, I just began nurturing this test subject this morning, but it has already evolved to such a level. Something terrible must have happened in the Seven Dragons Sea. It's very likely that the dimensional creatures in the sea will undergo a large-scale evolution, so we have to evacuate immediately, Hui Haifeng said seriously. Young Master Feng, aren't your words a little too arbitrary? Perhaps your experiments have gone wrong, or perhaps it's just an isolated phenomenon. It doesn't necessarily mean anything. Perhaps you need more experiments, Lu family head said disapprovingly. He wasn't particularly interested in the so-called scientific research. Young Master Feng, your words are a little too arbitrary. He even felt that scientific research was useless in this era. It was the era of God, and science was no longer useful. There were many people who thought like family head Lu. Furthermore, most people were unwilling to abandon Sea Return City and the mineral deposits that they had been operating for so many years and evacuate. After all, Hui Haifeng was only making a deduction. No one knew if his deduction would come true. Even if it came true, it wouldn't be too late to leave when they really couldn't stop the dimensional creatures. They still had the dimensional zones they operated on land as a retreat. Everyone, you might not know what this evolution speed means. Let me give you an analogy. According to this evolution speed, if an ordinary rat were to be injected with this element, it would only take 3 days. In 3 days, it would evolve to the body and strength of an elephant. If the creatures in the sea have such an evolution speed, do you still have the confidence to safely evacuate under their attacks? Do you still have the confidence to defend the dimensional zones? Hui Haifeng said. Young Master Feng, this is only your deduction after all. You can't just rely on your deduction to make us leave our homes, right? Family head Lu pondered for a moment and said, why don't we do this? We'll send some people with strong abilities in the water to investigate what happened in the sea. If it's really as you said, it won't be too late for everyone to leave. Yes. Family head Lu makes sense. Let's investigate it first. Many people supported family head Lu's suggestion. In the end, Hui Haifeng failed to persuade them. After all, Sea Return City wasn't something Hui Haifeng's family had the final say. Furthermore, even within the Hui family, many people felt that Hui Haifeng was being too alarmist. In fact, many members of the Hui family disapproved of Hui Haifeng's research. If it wasn't for the fact that Hui Haifeng paid for his research himself, they definitely wouldn't have let him do so much. After the meeting ended, Li Xian, who was waiting outside, asked Hui Haifeng, how was it? Hui Haifeng shook his head and said, it's useless. They have already been blinded by interest and comfort. They won't believe it unless they see the apocalypse with their own eyes. Li Xian said gloomily, Then what should we do? Old Zhou and little Yan are missing. Something big is definitely going to happen. Let's return to the lab first. I need to make some preparations. I have to move the important things out first. We can't stay here. Hui Haifeng quickly rushed to the lab. He knew that he didn't have much time left. Li Xian brought Yer and followed Hui Haifeng back to make preparations. At the same time, Sea Return City sent some humans with underwater abilities to enter the Seven Dragons Sea to investigate the disappearance of the dimensional creatures. What's there to investigate? Isn't that unnecessary? It's better that the dimensional creatures in the sea are gone. It saves us the trouble of coming ashore to harass us every once in a while, a middle-aged man said. It's all because of that young master Hui Haifeng. He said that there will be a huge anomaly in the sea. It's not like we haven't seen it before. What's there to make a fuss about? He even said that he wants us to move away from Sea Return. I think he's been reading too much and has turned his brain silly. What famous university? He doesn't know what he's talking about, the others laughed. They felt that a young master like Hui Haifeng only knew how to give orders blindly. What's that? Suddenly, someone realized that there seemed to be something in the seawater in front of them. A sea snake? That's not right. Why does it look like it has claws? Furthermore, the color isn't right. A sea snake should be blue. This one looks blue with a hint of gold. It's just a sea snake. Just kill it and bring it back for research. Just as they were about to move, they suddenly saw the strange sea snake rush out. Its speed was much faster than the average sea snake. Before one of them could react, he was bitten by the sea snake. Chapter 984. The people beside him swarmed forward and immediately sliced the strange sea snake into pieces. Old Li, don't be afraid. My companion beast can restrain the sea snake's poison. I'll treat you now, the person said as he summoned a companion beast to treat the bitten person's poison. He had treated the sea snake's poison many times, so it wasn't a troublesome problem. Indeed, the wound was quickly healed. There didn't seem to be any symptoms of being poisoned. Let's go quickly. Let's go ahead and take a look. If we can't find it, let's quickly return. Don't waste time here. The dimensional creatures in the sea have little to do with us, the few of them said as they continued diving deeper into the sea. However, they didn't realize that something was amiss with Old Li behind them. His eyes gradually turned golden, and tiny golden spots appeared on his face. After a while, Old Li suddenly pounced on the person in front of him as though he had gone mad. He opened his mouth and bit down on the person's neck. Ah! The person was caught off guard and was bitten. He screamed and turned to look at Old Li, only to see that his pupils had completely turned golden. There were many more guards on Sea Return City's sentry post. They were still concerned about the mysterious disappearance of dimensional creatures in the sea, but they were unwilling to leave Sea Return City just like that. In fact, most people could guess that something major had happened in the sea, but they were still hoping to get lucky. They're back! The guard on the sentry post discovered the people who had gone into the sea to investigate. 1, 2, 3, 7. All of them are back. I knew it. Nothing happened. Didn't they all return safely? If a huge anomaly really happened in the sea, how could they return so safely? The guard said happily. He had been on tenterhooks for the past 2 days, afraid that the huge anomaly Hui Haifeng mentioned was true. Old Li, how's the situation in the sea? Did you discover any mutated creatures? A few familiar guards greeted the people who had gone into the sea from afar. However, Old Li and company didn't say a word. They walked over with their heads lowered. I'm asking you a question. Why aren't you speaking? A guard leader said unhappily. When Old Li and the others got close, they finally raised their heads. When the guards saw them, they shivered and immediately shouted, "Not good!" Old Li and the others' eyes turned golden, and scales grew on their faces. They looked terrifying and strange. As soon as they shouted, Old Lee and the others bared their fangs and pounced on them. For a moment, the sentry post was in chaos. Someone sent out an alarm signal. When the few families saw the alarm signal, they were alarmed. They immediately organized people to observe, but they didn't discover any dimensional creatures on the coast. The sentry post was actually fighting their own people. Several families hurriedly brought people over to find out what was going on. When they arrived, the last conscious guard was bitten on the neck by Old Lee. Everyone was shocked and frightened by Old Lee and the others. What was even more terrifying was that the guards who had fallen to the ground dared to stand up again after a while. The eyes of the guards also began to turn golden, and golden spots appeared on their faces. However, they had yet to grow into scales. Infected. This word popped up in everyone's mind. Do it. Kill them all. We can't leave them alive. It's contagious. Old Master Hui immediately made a decision and gave the order. Only then did the frightened people react. No one dared to rush forward to fight them. Thankfully, there were enough people. They summoned their companion beasts and got them to fight them. They were surprised to discover that Old Lee and Company's bodies had become as hard as steel. Furthermore, their speed was terrifying. Furthermore, they didn't seem to feel ordinary injuries. Only by stabbing their hearts could they be killed. They no longer looked like humans, but more like dimensional creatures. Thankfully, only their bodies had become stronger. Their intelligence looked much weaker. Finally, with everyone's cooperation, they finally killed all the infected people. These corpses can't be left alive. Burn them. As soon as Old Master Hui finished speaking, everyone turned to look at the sea. No one went to burn the body. Wind and waves suddenly rose on the sea, and there seemed to be something surging within the wind and waves. Soon, they saw what it was. Countless dimensional creatures. Prawns, crabs, octopuses, sea snakes, and many strange creatures that they couldn't name, rushed up with the sea. It was unknown how many there were. What was even more terrifying was that they couldn't recognize the dimensional creatures they were previously familiar with. The sea snake had grown claws, and so did the shark. They rushed to the shore and charged at everyone with their fangs and claws. Retreat. Return to the city immediately. Everyone in the city, retreat into the dimensional zone. Old Master Huey's expression changed drastically as he shouted. Everyone's faces were pale. The dimensional creatures that swarmed over had exceeded their imagination. Apart from escaping, they had no second thought. Something even more terrifying happened. A large number of winged fish flew towards Sea Return City from the sky. The high wall was useless. The entire Sea Return City was in chaos. After some people were injured by the dimensional creatures, their bodies became strange. Those with strong bodies could still last for a period of time, but those with weak bodies quickly had their eyes turn golden. Golden spots began to appear on their skin. It's over. By the time Old Master Hui returned to the city, he saw that someone had been infected. Now everyone was filled with regret. If they had known this would happen, they would have listened to Hui Haifeng and moved away from Sea Return City. No matter how valuable the minerals here were, they wouldn't be able to enjoy them if they died here. Everyone, take refuge in the dimensional zone. Retreat immediately. Everyone retreat into the dimensional zone. Old Master Hui shouted as he killed. Now it was only the invasion of flying fish. There were many of them, but compared to the dimensional creatures that rushed out of the coast, it was nothing. Without Old Master Huey's shout, everyone was fleeing for their lives. Instantly, Sea Return City seemed to have turned into hell. There were sounds of killing and tragic screams everywhere. However, no one died. All the injured people stood up after a while, but when they stood up, they became members of the dimensional creatures and were no longer humans. The few families retreated as they fought. They gathered in a dimensional zone. It was the dimensional zone they had been operating for the longest time. They wanted to use the taboo in the dimensional zone to block these creatures. Boom! With the huge tsunami, a terrifying monster appeared. It looked like a huge octopus, but its tentacles were like WYRMS. Each one was 100 meters long. All sorts of horrifying creatures followed the horrifying monster and rushed over. The high walls were directly destroyed, unable to provide any protection at all. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.